Good morning. This is a meeting of the ISFMP Policy Board. My name is Doug Grout. I'm chair of the commission. And everybody, welcome. We had a very long night last night, and hopefully we'll be able to move things through fairly smoothly today. We have an agenda here. There are a couple of board letters that some of our boards have requested that the policy board consider moving forward because of some flight schedules. Instead of taking it up on their other business, I would like to insert motions from the lobster board after item number 5, and also a letter that the herring section has asked us to write immediately after the lobster board letters, again between items 5 and 6. With that change, are there any other changes or additions to the agenda that anybody would like to make? Seeing none, is there any objections to approving the agenda as modified? Seeing none, the the agenda is approved. Also, in your meeting briefing materials, there are the proceedings from our February meeting. Are there any modifications or additions to that? Seeing none, is there any objections from the board to approving those minutes? Seeing none, I see the proceedings approved. Now we have the opportunity for public comment. This is public comment from on things that are not on the agenda. I don't have anybody signed up for public comment. Is there anybody that wanted to make that comment? Seeing none, we will now move on to the executive committee report. Yesterday we met, and you'll have to give me a minute to pull that up. Excuse me. So at the executive committee yesterday, we approved the 2018 proposed budget. There was very little change between last year's budget and this year's budget. We also discussed an advisory panel, white paper that was put together regarding advisory panel members serving on boards. The motion, the option that we are going to bring forward to you at a future meeting is to modify our procedures that once an AP member is assigned as either a board-specific proxy or an ongoing proxy to a board for which he serves as an advisor, the new proxy must step down from the AP as a state-appointed new member. And again, we'll bring this forward to you at the August meeting for your consideration as a modification to our process. Also, we talked about we had a discussion about our technical committee meeting weeks. Originally, this was something that was set up to make things more efficient for our technical committee members that are on multiple technical committee memberships. We're going to move forward with actually, apparently we've gotten to a point where we're using more webinars. There was some concern that the technical committee members were reserving 3 weeks out of the year, and then they'd end up not meeting. There was some concern about whether this was still the most efficient and effective way to handle things. What the executive committee decided to do was to do a poll of the technical committee members to see if this is still a valuable tool for them, something that would help them out. And then we're also going to try and put together, have each board chair and plan coordinator put together like a 2 to 3 meeting outlook of what we're thinking is going to happen with these particular boards, to sort of give us an idea whether we need to have the technical committee meet during those periods. Other than that, we also had an overview from Bob on some of the budget items that are going through the House, through Congress right now. And finally, we did a performance review of Bob Beal and his efforts here, and I'm pleased to say that we think that he's done an outstanding job, and we hope that he will continue on with us for many years to come. That being said, are there any questions about my report here? Okay, thank you very much, and now we'll move on to agenda item number 5, and this is to review and consider the New Jersey appeal of Addendum 28 to the Summer Flounder Fisheries Management Plan. And the way that we're going to handle this is Tony's going to give an overview of the appeal and then our response letter to the state of New Jersey. Then we will give Bob Martin an opportunity for about 15 minutes to give to present the appeal to the board for consideration, and then we will have board discussion about it, and with the appeal there will be a requested action from New Jersey. So I'll turn it over to Tony, who will give a overview of our process and the appeal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the briefing materials, there was a couple of pieces that go along with this. First was Addendum 28, which is the document that New Jersey is appealing for the Summer Flounder, Scup, and Black Sea Bass Board. There was also the description of the Commission's appeal process, the letter from New Jersey appealing the addendum, the response letter from the Commission leadership to the New Jersey's letter, and then earlier this week I emailed out to the policy board a response letter from the state of New Jersey to the Commission's leadership letter. So those are all of your supporting documents to this. The Commission's appeal process states that once the Commission receives an appeal, we have 15 days for the Commission leadership to review that appeal and determine the merits of whether or not that appeal should be brought forward to the ISFMP Policy Board for their consideration. Commission leadership in this case is made up of the current chair and vice chair as well as the past chair. Any appeal that comes before the ISFMP Policy Board must be justified with one of the following criteria. The decision is not consistent with the FMP. It doesn't follow our process. There's insufficient, inaccurate, incorrect, or application of the technical information. The historical landings period is not adequately addressed, and the management actions resulting in unforeseen circumstances or impacts. So the state of New Jersey is appealing the Summer Flounder, Scup, Black Sea Bass Addendum 28. This addendum was approved for public comment in December of 2016. It is addressing the 2017 Summer Flounder recreational fishery for the coast. The document itself looked at a decrease in the 2017 recreational harvest limit to account for the declining status of the stock. The spawning stock biomass has been declining for summer flounder, and there was a 30% reduction required in the overall quota from 2016 to 2017. So the addendum proposed measures to meet the 2017 RHL. This document was taken out for public comment over the winter. After we went out for public comment, the working group that pulled together this document noticed that there was an error in the document. It was found prior to the February board meeting, and that error was emailed out to the Summer Flounder Scup and Black Sea Bass Board before the meeting. The chairman recognized the error that was in the document and at the meeting, and I'll discuss sort of how he went through that, but it was recognized prior to the approval of the document. The document was approved in February and with an implementation date of March 1st. All states were to let the commission know of their regulations by that date and the date in which their regulations would actually be implemented in their home state. So New Jersey sent us a letter appealing on several appeal criteria. The first criterion that I'm going to go through is their criteria 2 to failure to follow process. And the one bullet that commission leadership found that there was a justification to bring this appeal forward to the policy board was on inaccuracies in the draft addendum that was subject to public comment. New Jersey did correctly identify that there was an error in the text, which was found prior to the 2017 meeting when the document was approved. Information on the error, which was described in the calculation of the specific measures as specified in the revised addendum language memo, was actually sent to the board prior to the meeting. The chair noted the error and its late correction at the start of the meeting and suggested that the board proceed with its consideration of the draft, since the tables that were taken out for public comment, which included the actual example measures that would be implemented in each of the states, were correct. No board member objected to moving forward with the process. And also importantly, the actual option that was approved for approved in the final version of the addendum did not have any errors in it. So moving on. So there were a series of other claims that New Jersey appealed. All of those claims were rejected by leadership to bring forward to the policy board to be considered, and I'll go through all of those now. There are 2 criteria under failure to follow process. One is failure to include the enhanced opportunity of the shore fishing program in the draft addendum, as well as failure to consider public comment. New Jersey's appeal letter is correct in observing that the draft addendum did not discuss the shore mode program itself. However, staff notified the state that the shore mode program could still be included under the addendum at the joint meeting with the Mid-Atlantic Council in December of 2016, so that is prior to the document being taken out for public comment, and this was consistent with how we moved forward with the shore mode program in the previous year. It also was not included in the actual draft addendum or final addendum document. Secondly, there was a failure to properly consider public comment as one of the appeal criterion. Leadership rejected that claim that the commission did not properly consider public comment. The board was presented an overview of the comment. Detailed information regarding each of the hearings was included in the briefing materials for members of the board to review prior to the meeting. So there was adequate opportunity for public comment, and the board did not have, and the board did have the benefit of that comment before making its decision. The next criteria was insufficient, inaccurate, or incorrect appeal of the technical information. Specifically, variability and untimeliness of the MRIP data is not appropriate for yearly management approach. Leadership also rejected this claim. When considering final action on the addendum, the Commission fully acknowledges and takes into account uncertainty in MRIP harvest estimates. It recognizes that there are confidence intervals around those MRIP estimates that constrain our ability to precisely project impacts of differing management measures. The Commission is constrained in its ability to address this variability, given that summer flounder is jointly managed with the Mid-Atlantic Council, and it falls under the Magnuson-Stevens Conservation Act for management. One of the mandates of Magnuson is that there is an establishment of an annual recreational harvest limit and an associated management measures that seek to constrain us to this RHL. So in considering the 2016 harvest estimate relative to the 2017 RHL, the Commission determined that a reduction was needed to constrain coastwide harvest. This determination was based on 2016 MRIP harvest estimate, and the harvest estimates have been deemed the best available science for recreational harvest at this time. Until there's another data source or until interpretation of federal law changes, the Commission is obligated to use the previous year's MRIP data set to set the following year's measures. And then the last criteria, which was also rejected by leadership for review of the appeal for the ISFMP Policy Board, was criteria 5, management actions resulting in unforeseen circumstances or impacts to increases in the fishery resource waste. There were 4 bullets that they considered: disproportionate removal of large breeding females, unfairness and inequity among member states, failure to consider economic and social impacts, and compliance and data collection issues. None of these issues were considered by leadership as unforeseen circumstance or impact. To the contrary, each of these factors was actually considered and discussed by the board at either the December 2016 joint meeting as they were developing and initiating the draft addendum, and that was with compliance issues, data collection issues, as well at the Commission's 2017 winter meeting, where we discussed social and economic impacts thoroughly, and were also included in briefing materials for both of those meetings. I'm not going to get into all of the details, but there's a lot of information on each of those points in the letter. So yesterday, the Summer Flounder Board met for a little while. And at that board meeting, the board recommended that the ISFMP Policy Board find New Jersey out of compliance for failing to implement the measures of Draft Addendum 28. After they did that, New Jersey brought forward an alternative set of management measures that could be considered conservation equivalent to the ones that are in Draft Addendum 28. The board tasked the TC to review those measures, and then they will meet back again to hear the technical committee's comments and consider those management measures as soon as we can get the TC together, and then we'll have a board conference call to do so. So that's where we stand as of right now. I'll take any questions.
Any questions for Tony? Seeing none, I'd now like to turn this over to Bob Martin from New Jersey. If you'd like to come up to the mic and present your justification for the appeal and a remedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak to the Commission this morning. Before I discuss the question of New Jersey's appeal, I'd like to discuss New Jersey's proposed revised management plan for summer flounder. I want to first thank the Management Board for considering our proposal last night. I'd also like to thank NOAA Fisheries for their willingness to listen and consider additional ideas around our quotas. Although we would have preferred to have our proposal approved last night, we understand and respect the board's desire to follow established processes. We look forward to the technical committee's review of our proposal. We will certainly provide the committee with any and all information they need to ensure that our proposal substantially achieves the conservation equivalency. We all share the same goals: have a long-term thriving fluke stock, and secondly, lowering the total mortality of harvested and discarded fish. Our proposal meets these goals. As I shared with the Commission in February, and as the Management Committee heard yesterday, the option 5 will have a devastating impact on the state of New Jersey. This is why we have worked hard to come up with an acceptable alternative. In New Jersey, if anglers are limited to a 19-inch fish, the impact on New Jersey will be severe. According to a recent analysis done by the economists at Montclair State University, option 5 could cost the state's economy as much as $750 million. It will also destroy thousands of jobs. I will be glad to share the results of that study with the Commission once it's been finalized and peer-reviewed. In addition, setting the size limit at 19 inches will have an unintended consequence of driving down recruitment rates. That's because 90% of the 19-inch fish off New Jersey's waters are females capable of breeding. The last thing any of us want is to target the females responsible for increasing recruitment. We want to ensure the health of our summer flounder stock this summer and for years to come. For clarity's sake, I'd like to review New Jersey's proposed alternative to the ISFMP's option 5. While we appreciate the traditional approach is to focus on harvest reductions, our approach also considers the reduction of total fish mortality. We are proposing a 104-day season instead of the 128-day season. This is a significant concession by the state of New Jersey. And we are also proposing on limits on both fish and on number of bag limits. An 18-inch fish with a bag limit of 3 in coastal waters, a 17-inch fish with a bag limit of 3 in Delaware waters, and a 16-inch fish with a bag limit of 2 as part of the shore-based Enhanced Fishing Opportunity Program at Island Beach State Park. The season will begin on May 25th and will end on September 5th. We also believe we can reduce the dead discard rate from 10% we use today to at least 8% in New Jersey in the future. To achieve this, we'll initiate a targeted public education campaign. We will leverage the resources that NOAA has created as part of its Fish Smart campaign. The state will invest significant resources to work diligently with anglers to drive down the dead discard rate. I should also point out that even by just setting the size limit at 18 inches versus 19 inches, our proposal will reduce the overall mortality in fluke fishery by reducing the number of discards. As a result, we will reduce the total mortality of both harvested and discarded fish by nearly 300,000 when you compare that to the 2016 quotas, and for option 5 by almost 200,000 fewer fish. When we achieve at least the 8% dead discards, there will be 400,000 fewer dead fish than in the 2016 quotas, and about 250,000 fewer than under option 5. New Jersey's option, with a significant reduction in the length of the season to 104 days, the 18-inch fish, the bag limit of 3, will cut the harvest by 23%. And with an 8% discards, we reduce the total dead discards compared to 2016 by 30%. Reducing total mortality is our goal we all share, especially for recreational and fishing industry in the state of New Jersey. And our proposal achieves that. Mr. Chairman, once again, I appreciate the Commission's consideration of our proposal. I am confident that when the technical committee reviews the science and the analytics behind our proposal, they will agree that it achieves the conservation equivalency. Our experts at New Jersey Marine Fisheries are confident that our proposal achieves what we stated on a conservation equivalency. And we consulted with NOAA Fisheries to ensure that we're meeting basic thresholds of conservation equivalency before bringing this up to this group. Given the fact that the technical committee still has to review our proposal and the final commission approval has been pushed off to next week, New Jersey wishes to table our appeal pending the final outcome. I'm sure you can appreciate the need for New Jersey to keep all its options on the table until this matter is concluded. Should our proposal be approved, we will immediately withdraw our appeal. Mr. Chairman, I'd like again to express my thanks to the Summer Flounder Management Board and to the Commission and to NOAA for considering our alternative to option 5 for the coming season. the state of New Jersey remains strongly committed to the prudent management of our fisheries. We look forward to continuing to work with you closely in achieving these goals. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Is there anybody on the board that would have any questions for Mr. Martin? Okay, seeing none. I believe I heard that your suggested remedy right now for today would be a motion to table. Russ?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'd like to move to table New Jersey's appeal of Addendum 28 to the Summer Flounder, Scup, and Black Sea Bass FMP until after the next Summer Flounder, Scup, and Black Sea Bass Management Board meeting. And I'll go slower if I have to.
We'll wait till that gets up on the board before I ask for a second, but thank you very much for that motion. Russ, Bob Beal, we have a question about the process here with this.
Russ, I think in your motion you mentioned that you wanted to postpone this until the next Summer Flounder Board meeting. Should it be the Policy Board meeting, since that's the group that you know, handles the appeals? I know you want to have the Tech Committee review and then the Summer Flounder Board meeting, but if you want to, you know, if the decision is to withdraw that, it would essentially be withdrawn from the Policy Board.
However you think it's best, Bob.
Policy Board probably would be better.
So you're comfortable with that, and is that a postpone motion or a table motion?
I think technically it's a motion to postpone until time certain, but we can get wrapped up in parliamentary stuff pretty quickly. But I think move to postpone is probably more appropriate.
Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah,
Russ?
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. Is there a second to this motion? David? Any discussion on the motion? Richie White.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess just to try to understand this. So I'm trying to understand the timing and what regulations go into effect at what times. So if the conservation equivalency either is or is not approved by the technical committee, at that point New Jersey will be putting in some regulation. I guess what is that regulation? And then the policy board, unless there's a special policy board meeting, then that's going to be August. So what's the regulation that goes into effect if the technical committee does not approve the conservation equivalency? What does New Jersey propose to have for regulations that would go into effect within the next few weeks or whenever that time period ends that the technical committee decides? And August. And then whatever is determined in August, how fast can New Jersey react to any changes that would be done at the August board? So I'm trying to get a sense of how much fishing is going to occur under what regulations.
Russ?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We expect that the technical committee will approve or at least give it the okay for the board, and then it's up to the board to decide what to do after that. I don't have any qualms in that. I think it'll go through because we've done a lot of work to get it to that point. And with that said, we plan to have our regulations in place next week with those regulations, knowing that, you know, the board might not be able to get together before then and approve that, but at least we'd have that piece in place already. We have, you know, the notice that we have to do is already done. The commissioner has already said he will sign it. He just talked about it. We can have that done by next week. So no matter when the board decides on anything, we have to have that in place before May 21st because that's when the old regs start up. So we have to have that done next week. So that'll be done. And then the season doesn't start in this until May 25th. So it gives the board some more time to whether or not they approve it. And then we'd have a whole nother thought process to worry about whether the board approves it or not. So I think that answers your question. We're doing everything we can to make sure this works. You know, we're putting a lot of time into it.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I understand that part. And so are you suggesting that there be a special policy board meeting then, or the August meeting, so that those regulations would stay in effect until August, even if the technical committee does not approve them? Is that?
Russ?
Me and Richie can have this talk outside, but the reason I said in the beginning to the board meeting itself was because you know, that's where the process should end, obviously, once that's approved. I don't think it will be disapproved. I think it'll be approved, and that'll be that. It's more of a process type thing we're talking about now as far as the appeal goes. The appeal, if everything goes as we expect, the appeal's gone. It'll be a moot point anymore. So I don't think there's a need to worry about that. It'll come up at the August board meeting, and we can just table it forever, or however the process in Robert's rules is to do that. So we don't expect the appeal to be going forward anymore. You know, I think we're going to all be pretty happy on how this all works out. Once the technical committee gets this, reviews it, and sees exactly what we did. You know, we've had some, you know, Peter Clark did most of the work, but Jeff Bruss is, you know, really respected around this table as an assessment scientist, has really gone through this, and he's the one, you know, made sure all the numbers were right. So we've had people check it. We've had people that are outside our agency check it in the DEP that are, you know, research scientists that do this work. So we're pretty confident everything should move forward pretty well. Like I said, we're willing to do whatever it takes. However the process takes us, we will do it. And we'd love to just say goodbye to it today if we could. But obviously we have to wait and make sure the Summer Flounder Black Sea Bass Scup Board agrees with us. So,
Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just, you know, I know some of the states, obviously, were not sitting in on the Summer Flounder Board, luckily for them, at 8:30 or so last night. But you know, there was a non-compliance finding motion forwarded to this policy board that's going to be addressed later in this meeting. And I think we're starting to wrap up, you know, potential non-compliance findings with the appeal. And the appeal, as Russ mentioned, is a procedural issue that's handled by the policy board. And the next policy board will be will take place in August. But you know, I think controlling the comfort level of the board as to when New Jersey is going to implement what regulations, and if non-compliance letters should be sent to NOAA fisheries. I think that discussion is part of the later agenda item on non-compliance, and I think we have to keep non-compliance and the appeal a little bit separate.
I agree. Robert?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bob said what I was going to suggest.
Eric Reed?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate all the effort that New Jersey has made, as well as the Commission on this issue. But my question is for New Jersey. They talked about a substantial amount of outreach to make this work for the state and for the Commission, I suppose. Some of it was on how to handle fish handling, which you know, my question to New Jersey is that something you're going to go forward with now, which would be to your advantage? I understand a lot of it has to do with the outcome of this whole thing, but just to gauge New Jersey's commitment, are they going to go ahead and do the portion of their public outreach that is applicable at this moment?
Russ, do you have a response?
Sure. We plan on having actually, we're going to have an update call with our constituents this afternoon. That's where it'll start, because we've committed to that. We've already talked to all of them, and they're all on board on moving this forward. And that's, JCAA, RFA, United Boatman, all our constituent groups, our NJOA, everybody that's involved in New Jersey fisheries is already on board with this. So we're planning on putting out PSAs, brochures, short videos that can be popped up on phones. We're doing the whole works, and it starts today as soon as we get done with this and move it forward, because we are going to talk to them again and say this is what we're doing. So it's a regardless of what happens in anything else, that's going to happen regardless. So that's where we're going to be.
Tom Foti?
Yeah, and I think this is an example not just for what we do on summer flounder, but we should do in a bunch of species. We did this years ago on bluefish when we were doing a catch and release. We did it on striped bass, but it fell through the wayside. How do we do catch and release? NIMS has been pushing it for years under the Skillful Angle program, if I'm right, one of the programs we're doing it. So maybe this should be part of every plan that we put out, is basically to do this type of communication to our constituents when it comes to hook and release mortality. When we start killing more fish for hook and release mortality than we do taking home to eat, that's a problem. We need to figure out a good way of reducing it. This is a start to that problem.
Yes. Sorry. Chris Bass-Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate New Jersey's attempt to help anglers, learn better ways to release fish safely, and I agree with Tom. It's something that should be done with a lot of species, not just summer flounder. A question I have is, with something like this, there's usually a kind of a learning education process, just as far as better handling practices. Despite putting out all the education and outreach stuff, these people just don't learn it overnight, and especially during the summertime, where I suspect it would be more than just the hardcore anglers. You're going to have a lot of traveling, vacationing anglers who maybe aren't as avid as a lot of the constituents that you reach out to. So, question is, are you concerned that you may not have the realized benefits the first year of this initiative than compared to what you might see a few years later, trying to get this information out?
Russ?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a great question, Chris. We've already, as Commissioner Martin said, we did a survey in a month and had 26,000 responses. We sent out 130,000 to 130,000 anglers, and we got 26,000 responses that quick. And some of the major questions in there were about fish handling and things of that nature. So I made a mistake when I replied to Eric before that we're starting it today. We actually started it already to get it in people's heads to do that. So the goal is to make sure all our for-hire fleet is on board with this, and they will have that. I mean, that's probably where the biggest amount of discard mortality is in the first place. So, they're on board, and they're going to, make sure that we have brochures to hand out to everybody that comes on. So that's where you're talking about the people just coming in for a weekend or something like that. We're going to have it at bait and tackle shops where everybody else is going, so the brochures will be there. They'll be part of our digest. We have our digest coming out in a few weeks that's going to have an article in there talking about fish handling techniques, and that's sitting there at every bait and tackle shop up and down New Jersey coast. So we're doing all that work already. We've also committed to when we were discussing this with Noah, talking about having a survey done at different points within the season to see if anybody's getting this information to make sure it's working. So I think we're going to do everything we need to do. If someone has a suggestion on how to make this even better, just remember that the 10% is an average of different studies. It was 7 to 16%, I think, if memory serves me correctly, for the stock assessment, and it was averaged out to 10. So, you know, we may even bring that further down than 8%, but I think an 8%, just a 2% drop is tremendous in the amount of fish it saves. So,
any other, Adam?
So I'll just also add, Chris, that while the proposal talks about decreasing discards specifically in New Jersey, these are public information documents that'll be available. We would sincerely hope that other jurisdictions would take them, distribute them, make them available, promote them. And imagine if we could take that information through this initiative that starts in New Jersey and reduce the discards by 2% up and down the entire coast. Imagine the benefit we could generate at that point.
Further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, do you need time to caucus on this? I'll give you 30 seconds to caucus. Okay, are you ready to vote? All those jurisdictions in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Any no votes? The motion carries 17 to 0 to 0 to 0. Thank you very much. And now we're on to the Lobster Board. We have motions for the Policy Board to consider 3 letters, I believe it is, or 2 letters? 2.
3.
David Borden, Chair of the...
Mr. Chairman, you want to make the motion first or just provide some background first? Context.
Why don't you make each motion one at a time and then make a little context for each
Okay,
one.
so on behalf of the American Lobster Board, I recommend that the ISFMP Policy Board send a letter supporting the preferred alternatives developed by the New England Regional Fishery Management Council and their deep-sea coral amendment.
Rationale?
Okay, so the rationale here, and I'll try to keep this simple in the interest of time, the New England Council has been developing a deep-sea coral amendment for some time. That amendment is now in the final stages of development. It is being said, the council authorized it to go out to public hearing with preferred alternatives, and the timing of all that is that the public hearings will be taking place in the next month. The council intends to finalize its position on the amendment and submit it to NOAA at the end of June or July. Okay, so the importance here is that this really is our last opportunity to influence that process. A number of us around the table, including the commission chairman, have participated in that process. The council adopted preferred alternatives and they were overwhelmingly endorsed by the members of the council. And as your representative on that board, I voted for all of the preferred alternatives, as I think most of the New England Council representatives on the commission did. So all this is the suggestion that we forward recommendation, send a letter, that the commission chair be authorized to send a letter to the New England Council chairman, essentially advocating the preferred alternatives that were identified by the committee.
Any questions for the board? Mark?
Just one comment. The first sentence, I think, should be amended to indicate that the letter is going to the council. It doesn't say who it's going to.
You okay with that? Okay. This was a motion by the board, so it doesn't need a second. Is there any objections to this motion? Seeing none, that motion is passed. Next.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Second motion is on behalf of the American Lobster Management Board, recommend that the ISFMP Policy Board send a letter to the Department of Interior reiterating the Commission's previous letter to President Obama regarding what is now the New England Canyons and Seamount National Monument. So on behalf of the board, I make that motion.
Motion doesn't need a second. Could you speak to the motion?
Okay, so the canyon issue is obviously related to the coral issue. These are quite linked issues. And just by way of background, I'll remind everybody that President Obama declared, I think, 4,500 square miles of territory in the Atlantic, 5 canyons, part of a national monument under the 1906 Antiquities Act. The Commission attempted previously to affect that determination and submitted a letter in which they recommended that the monument boundaries be set at 900 meters and seaward from that. And the reason for that was an attempt by the Commission to hold the fishery resources that are being prosecuted in that area harmless from the effects of the monument. So President Trump now has signed an executive order which essentially directs the Department of Interior to review all of the monuments, which includes the monument that I just referenced. That solicitation is going to be in the Federal Register, I think, next week. Megan has a copy of the solicitation, which will circulate to the entire Commission. So there's a 60-day comment period. As with the previous issue, we have a limited period of time to respond to this. So the suggestion from the Lobster Board is basically to authorize the chair to submit a letter. And the key provisions of the letter will be to endorse managing marine resources in the monument area via the Magnuson and Council process. It will talk about the need for transparency in the process. And it'll also fold in the recommendation that you just authorized on establishing a management boundary at 600 meters, similar to the New England Council position. So I'm happy to take questions.
Any questions from the board? Seeing none, is there any objections to sending this letter? Seeing none, the motion is approved. Letter number 3.
Okay, final issue, and this will be quick. On behalf of the Lobster Management Board, recommend that the ISFMP Policy Board send a letter to NOAA recommending full adoption of Addenda 21 and 22.
Motion from the board does not need a second. Would you like to speak?
Okay, and the background here is there were two provisions of those addendum that the National Marine Fisheries Service decided to not, or at least temporarily not, implement, and those provisions related to a trap cap, declining trap cap for Area 3 and trap banking for Area 2. The trap cap proposal in Area 3, under the current regulations, offshore boats are entitled to fish up to, I think it's 1,945 traps, and the provision in the addendum is basically to lower that cap over time, 5 years. The provision was endorsed by the offshore lobster industry, and it has the benefit of reducing vertical lines in the water, which are a concern in terms of protected species. So NOAA wanted to delay action on it until they saw the final actions from the Lobster Board, which have been taken. So this is nothing more than a restatement of our policy and a request that they implement both of those provisions, which have already been adopted by the Commission.
Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, is there any objection to approving this motion? Motion is approved. Thank you. We now have a letter from the Herring Section that I'll turn to our Herring Section Chair, Richie White, to bring forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll read the motion and then speak to it a little bit. On behalf of the Atlantic Herring Section, recommend the ISFMP Policy Board send a letter to National New England Fisheries Management Council requesting participation in the oversight of the research set-aside program.
Motion by the section, doesn't need a second.
The council, the section is aware of and approves of the amount of harvest that is part of the research set aside. The section, though, does not participate in how that is prosecuted, and there's concern about when it's harvested and where it's harvested, because in the past there has been some gear conflict issues. So the section would like to be involved in how this fishery is prosecuted. So that's the basis.
Any questions for Richie White? Seeing none, is there any objection from the board to passing this motion? Seeing none, the motion is approved. Now we'll move on to agenda item number 6. This is an update on the climate change working group. I'm going to be Tony Kearns, and just as the chair of the group, I will tell you that we had a very long and fruitful meeting on Monday morning, and we are still in the process of flushing out our white paper. We probably are going to need another meeting or webinar to finalize it, but our intent is to have something for you, the policy board, to consider either at the summer or the fall meeting. And I think it'll contain a number of tools that many of the management boards could use to adapt their management, at least to consider for adapting their management in the face of any changes that they see in these species due to climate change. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll now move on to item number 7, and this is to review and discuss the 2017 Commissioner Survey results. And Deke Tompkins is going to present the results.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, so we have our 2017 Commissioner Survey results. Thank you to the 26 people who filled out the survey this year. We are down from the mid-30s the past 2 years, so a little bit less participation. As you can see across the board, there was a decrease in satisfaction on 14 of the 15 questions. The top 3 questions with the biggest drop in satisfaction you can see here. So that was satisfaction with cooperation between commissioners to achieve our vision, satisfaction with commission's ability to manage rebuilt stocks, and comfort level with reacting to new information and adapting to meet the commission goals. And then from the written comment section, there were some themes that emerged. These are somewhat listed in the order that they appeared by frequency. So climate change and impacts appeared throughout all the questions pretty much. Scarcity of fiscal resources, issues with data, and then a big theme was individuals, states, promoting their interests over the coast as a whole. There was a lot of requests for more socioeconomic analyses, and I think this week is a pretty good example of the meeting week agendas being very full. With that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions from John Clark?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Deke. I was just curious with the questions where you had the big drops. Some of them seem to be, I wonder how closely related they are to decisions the board has just taken before the survey came out.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just looking at that big drop, and I'm wondering if that had anything to do with the flounder plan, the managing the rebuilt stocks.
The survey was open from March 14th through April 7th, so I think you can read into the time, you know, how you like. I'm not saying if it was taken at a different time, it may have been different, but.
Right, just this year in particular, I just think the whole process with flounder, for example, was such that I think a lot of people were unhappy with it and might have colored their answers on that question in particular, because of course flounder was considered rebuilt very recently.
Yeah, I saw 2 issues here. One, the rather thin participation in this, and that can affect things, especially where we're talking roughly a third of the commissioners did not respond to this, and whether those commissioners respond could affect things minimally or considerably. So I encourage in the future that you take the time. It usually only takes about half an hour to really spend some time working on this. The other thing that I had noticed here is, and it may relate to what John and Deke were saying as reasons, is, you know, we had most of these questions were kind of flat as far over during the period 2010 to 2013, and then suddenly we had this bump up in 14 and 15. It seemed like we were doing real good. We'd made some improvements, and then we've seen some modest declines, but then we had the sharp decline right now. So it could be a result of specific actions that have been taken over this past year. David Borden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question, not a question on the survey, but do you want the discussion to be integrated with the presentation, or do you want the discussion to follow? In other words, are we in just questions at this point?
In this case, I'd have both questions and discussion at this point.
Okay, so I'd like to just make the point, and actually I've discussed this point with the chairman. I actually think dissatisfaction is rising. I think that this is a real reflection on the process, and so that everybody understands it. I have the utmost respect for the process, the staff, and all the commissioners here. So I'm not criticizing anyone. Having been involved in this process for a number of years, being out of it for almost 10 years and then coming back into it recently, I just don't see personally that we have a sustainable model at this point. And the reason I say that, if you look at the way we're making decisions, and I'm specifically talking about the recreational fisheries, we're doing these annual specification packages that are almost invariably at the last minute. We get the information at the last minute. We put tremendous pressure on our own staff. We put tremendous pressure on all the stock assessment people to do the work. And as a result of that, we're getting the information we're getting is good. I think it's accurate, but the decision process doesn't really have a lot of time to deal with this. And what we end up with is this cycle where we're kind of yo-yoing the regulations on an annual basis, and what I view is that we have to figure out a way to smooth the decisions out and take a little bit longer time frame. In other words, and I don't have the answer to it, I would point out, but if we had a system where we had 2-year specifications for recreational measures instead of 1, then it would take a lot of that urgency out of it. I'd also point out, from having worked in a state agency, having the state agencies have to deal with these types of issues and communicate to hundreds of thousands, millions of constituents at the last minute is really undesirable. I mean, none of the state agencies like to do this at the last minute. And if you're on the opposite side of the issue, if you're on the recipient side of the issue, you don't want to be a member of the party charter boat trying to schedule bookings and not know what the regulations are. So I think my answer to it, as I said, I don't have the answer to it, but I think the way forward to kind of reverse this trend, because I think it's going to accelerate personally, is I think at some point we need a really directed discussion by the commissioners on how we do business, and maybe come up with some new models on how to deal with these issues. Thank you.
I certainly see your point, and the only question I have for the board is this really something specific to the fluke black sea bass SCUP board, as I see other species, important recreational species that we manage, like bluefish, striped bass. We do try to keep regulations fairly consistent over the years, so it seems like it's very much, from my perspective, tied to that board. Is that your feeling? And then I'll move on to the other.
Yeah, that actually I think is a good point that you raise. Some of our species I think work well, but I don't think we can apply all of the same rules to those. So we may need different rules for specific species and deal with them accordingly. Thank you.
Dave Pierce, and then Tom Foti, and Dennis Abbott.
Yeah, I know when I filled out this questionnaire, my responses were colored by what was happening with discussions about recreational fisheries management. Overall, the Commission is doing a very good job, and for the most part, my ratings were very positive. However, relative to the summary of all of the findings, I really don't know how to interpret these findings regarding we're less satisfied now than we were a couple of years ago or last year. I don't know how to interpret this, because if you look at the y-axis, the differences in the ratings are so small. we're not looking at a change in rating from like 8 to 4. We're looking at very small changes, frankly, and these are small changes that came about perhaps because different people took the survey this year versus last year. So there's a lot of unknowns in this particular assessment of our performance. I'd much rather just focus on the comments that people actually, took the time to write. And that's where we'll gain some insight as to how we're doing now versus the year before and the year before that. Again, I look at commission progress, the first one, questions 1 and questions 2, and I looked that we dropped from 8.1 to 7.6 from 2016 to 2017, and frankly, that has no influence on me whatsoever. I can't interpret that. I don't conclude that we've made less progress based upon this analysis. Again, if we've made less progress, each and every one of us will make that decision as a personal perspective, depending upon how things have gone for us.
Tom Foti?
It's interesting, I'm following Dave, because let's look at what happened last night on Black Sea Bass, and this is where it comes into play. It was a region that we're supposed to take cuts because there was overage in the region. A motion was put on the table and voted on with people not understanding how that worked out. The states that actually were being penalized, the states that did not go over, the person making the motion took no hit whatsoever. So some of the states in that Black Sea Bass, like New Jersey, is going to lose a 10 fish, go from 15 fish to 5 fish. One state gets no cuts at all because they have no season during the end. It was none of that part of the decision process explaining how this is going to affect the states equally in that region. And basically one state got short end of the stick and 2 others got penalized when maybe they weren't the problem. But like, I don't know where Connecticut was, I don't know where Rhode Island was, but we got penalized for what happened in the winter season, where one of the states that has increased its catch took no hit whatsoever and was quick to make the motion to do that. So, and that's when we see that it's not fairly being distributed. And that's sometimes, if you would have taken the survey after that vote last night, yeah, it would have been really down. Because most of the time on Black Sea Bass, Summer Flounder, and Scub, I blame because it's a cooperative plan. And we're stuck with a lot of decisions that we can't affect. Like on sea bass, we're forced to make cuts because it's a joint plan. But when we do things on this, when it goes conservation equivalency, and makes decisions like this at the spur of the moment without all the members understanding, and the southern states voted for it because they figured, well, we'll get it done because they didn't want to be impacted, but they unfairly treated New Jersey because we took a 10-fish cut when we weren't the problem. We caused none of the problem. We weren't over last year. So you can understand why we'd be upset over this and not feel like we're being treated fairly at the commission level. So if it was basically going on last night, you would have seen that if I had basically filled out a survey.
Dennis Abbott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you could put up the overall graph that you had. I do agree with Dave Borden that there is a negative trend with things going on. But again, that graph makes it look worse than it is because it only runs from 6.6 to 8.4. So we're really seeing, a change from 8 1/4 to 7 1/2, 3/4 of a number. So yes, there is some diminishment of things in people's mind. I also find that the participation is really disappointing at this point. You roughly got about half of the people, 26 out of 45 plus PRFC, whatever, however you say that, in Potomac River. So there could have been however many more participants. And if we want to blame it on black sea bass and scup, about six of our states don't even participate in those species. So I don't think we should lay it onto those factors. We also don't know who the 26 were that filled out the survey. So we really don't have a good snapshot, in my opinion, of where we are. I was wondering, I think it might be curious, at least to me, if in a future survey that we broke it down by maybe the LGAs and the state directors to see if there's any correlation between what the LGAs think and what the state directors think. I think that would be interesting. It'd still be a blind survey, but I would like to have consideration of breaking it down that way. Maybe the LGAs are expressing a lot more disappointment. Maybe it's the opposite. I don't know the answer to that, but it would be an interesting answer. Another thing that factors in here, you can look from year to year, but if you look around the table, there's a lot of faces that change. I mean, I've been here for 21 years, and there's only less than a handful of people, that have been here that long. And some people, are on their first, second, third year, and surely they view things differently than other people, like Dave Borden said. I mean, he's watched the goings-on with the commission for many more years than I have. So anyway, I think we have to not take this survey with a grain of salt, but we really need to do something to improve our participation and give this survey a lot of thought, because it can be very helpful. Thanks.
Richie White.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Dave. I think Dave, you're on to something. And I think that it's not just summer flounder. I think striped bass is another example, and I don't mean what we just went through this week, because a number of years ago, when the population was lower, the New England states pushed very hard to try to lower mortality because they wanted to see more fish. I think it's an expectation of the anglers, knowing that we can react more quickly than the council or the service. So we're viewed as an entity that can change things if they don't like it. And I think that is a strength for us, but I think in this instance that it can be a weakness as well. And how we kind of switch that, I don't know, but I like Dave bringing it up, and I think it's something we ought to investigate further, because it does create more staff time and expense when we're quickly reacting to anglers that are upset with what's going on. So I think it is an important issue, and I think we ought to address it somehow.
Adam Nowalski.
Thank you very much. So I hear the comment of not sure who filled out the survey. I'm willing to go on the record and say I filled out the survey. And I'm also willing to say that when you look at some of the major themes, including self-interest, when you look at some of the downtrends in the graphs, I'm willing to say that I'm an element of it. And while I certainly haven't been here as long as many of you, I've certainly been here more long than some. To that end, when I think about the public constituency, literally in tears at the public microphone last night over a species that is perhaps in the best biological shape of any we manage in black sea bass. We have some very hard decisions we have to make. American lobster, weak fish, winter flounder, northern shrimp. They're hard decisions because there's factors impacting our ability to manage these species that, quite frankly, are out of our control. And then we take a species like black sea bass, where we're simply making bad decisions. There's no other way around it. They are simply bad decisions. And we can try to dress up the graph and say, well, it's only a small range, but out of the time series there, the reality is that number of the overall satisfaction is the second lowest in the time series. When we look at those three other major question areas, one of those is the second lowest in the time series. Two of the other ones are the lowest in the time series. And when we have boards making decisions, 11-member boards, making decisions that are negatively impacting only 2 of the states on the board primarily, we have a real problem with ourselves. We have a real problem with our public perception. And that problem is real, and we need to do something about it. We just got done talking about the New Jersey appeal. There's certainly a lot that went on behind the scenes. I know a lot of questions about the process, a lot of people concerned about the fact that New Jersey had to go to NOAA fisheries first in terms of trying to get some relief on this. I know a lot of people here with military backgrounds. You respect the chain of command. That is not something to be taken lightly, to break that chain of command. But when it lets you down, you have no choice but to go outside of it. No choice. And on that particular issue, that is only the tip of the iceberg. And if we do not react in a positive manner, it's only the beginning. I have confidence in all of us as individuals to make good decisions. I hope that we can find a way to make better decisions, and I agree with the element that certainly these recreational issues are one of the largest that are holding us back.
Tom Foti, and then Jason McNamee.
When only 26 people respond, I think, because I estimate on surveys, is the people that care and people that are involved. You know, we have 45 commissioners. There wasn't 45 commissioners at this meeting. A lot of people don't show up. Some of the proxies do show up, but some people didn't show up altogether. There's not a lot sitting at the table. There wasn't a lot sitting at the table from other states yesterday. The people that most of the time fill out surveys are the people that are involved in the process and want their comments made. So I don't look at the 26 as a bad number. I mean, when we just did a survey of 130,000 angles, we say we got 26,000. When you get 20% of the people you survey, that's what my background is in marketing management. That's a good response. And when you get 26 out of 45, that's a good response, because those are the people that are actively involved and they care and they basically took the time to write the survey. I did fill out the survey, and mine was similar comments would be to Adam, what Adam just said. I mean, there's some real problems that's come on in the last couple of years that we're not dealing with certain things in a fair and equitable manner, and we just see that. And also, I think because you have new commissioners, you know, some of us have been around a long time, understands the ups and downs of the commission, and we look at it and realize where we started from when LGAs didn't even have a seat at the table, and there was 5 members of a board deciding what we were doing. So we've come a long way, but maybe we're just shakily getting a little complacent in the way we handle things and make motions too late at night and on things without really looking at what we're doing.
Jason?
Okay, time for a little optimism. Relatively new to this part of the process, and so and no plans on going anywhere anytime soon, so I need to have hope and optimism for this process, and I think there's reason to be. David Borden talked about a new model. We're developing those new models, things like our risk and uncertainty policy that we're working on. That's a way forward here. That's a way we're going to be able to structure our decision process in a better way, to have a little more guidance, so we're not, you know, rudderless as we're moving along here. The pain and the challenges that we faced with our recreational fisheries this year, sometimes you need a kick in the pants to move in the right direction, and I think we got that this year. And again, I'm optimistic. We've got an RFP that came out from the Mid-Atlantic looking at new techniques for how we manage some of our recreational fisheries, and I think you've got a lot of good ideas coming out of your technical committees for better ways of doing business in recreational fisheries and others. So I think this was a challenging meeting week, but we've set up ourselves to be optimistic and to be successful moving forward. and we just need to be able to embrace those changes and try those new techniques. Thank you.
Jim Gilmore?
Just a quick note, and I didn't say yesterday, but it's kind of along the lines of Adam's comments. It's something I learned many years ago. One of my early mentors and said, and it applies to a lot of management situations, it's we should serve the resource, not the rule, the regulation, or the process. And I think a lot of the survey has maybe gotten to that point. And I think both in this, and also, you know, not to beat up on him, but the federal government, we are serving the process, the rules too much. We're not serving the resource, the fishery, the people, the stocks, whatever. And it's really something we need to get out of this box. And that's where we need to go in the future. And I think the survey will go back up if we can figure out a way to stop being concerned about what the number is as opposed to what's actually going on in the resource. So I leave that out for everyone, that if that helps, I think, as a mantra for the future, we really need to get back to that simple thing that I learned over 30 years ago. We need to serve the resource, not the process. Thanks.
We're going to take one more comment on this, as we do need to move on. Dave Borden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make it brief. Just so everyone understands, I'm not a pessimist. I'm just the opposite, a complete optimist. And I just point out that, in my view, strong organizations are constantly reviewing the way they do business and figuring out better ways to do it. We have a lot of wonderful intellect in this room, and I'm sure we can improve on almost everything we do.
Since I said one last comment, I've had two more hands, and I'm going to hold firm to two more comments, and that's it. No more. Bob, I'm sorry, you're out. Ray Kane and then Russ.
Yes, good morning, Commission members. This is a come to Jesus moment. This is my second meeting, so I did not fill out the survey. But I'm a little betwixt at this point. At my first formal commission meeting, we had a representative from the Academy of Science come in and talk to us about MREP. It was a fluid conversation. Not many questions, do I recall, were asked of her. And she went on to tell us that, you know, MREP, it's a good system, needs to be tweaked. And yet in the follow-up meeting, I heard a lot of dissatisfaction with MREP once again. So as a newly appointed commissioner, I'm a little lost here, because when she was here doing her presentation, she wasn't charged with the questions that I hear often around this table at other meetings. And I happen to have a strong belief in the National Academy of Science. I know they helped us out years ago with the Atlantic bluefin tuna. So I'm a little lost in this process. We bring somebody in, they take the time, we schedule hours for a particular meeting, and the representative gets up and walks away, and then we're back to the same old gripe once again about how MREP is not really working. And more or less from the years I've been coming to these meetings, commercial fisheries have been in compliance from what I could gather at this table, and it's always the recreational fishery we're having an issue with. So once again, let's have a come to Jesus moment here, and either we're going to accept MREP, and hopefully Jason, working with MREP, will be able to improve the process so we can function better as a commission. Thank you.
Russ?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, just to alleviate some of the concerns that are around this table, just know that, you know, in the past few years, Brandon Muffley filled out that survey, and, you know, he's a nice guy, and I got to do it this year after taking over his job, so it might have had a little bit to do with some of those numbers, so thank you.
Okay, Bob.
I'll be quick. You know, one of the things that popped up there that hasn't been talked about is agendas during meeting weeks and workload and the number of things that are trying to be accomplished during an individual meeting week. And I think that feeds off of this annual cycle and the needed quick reactions to recreational data in our frankly in our joint management plans. Those are the ones that are the trickiest, and that workload during meeting weeks translates into staff burden on the technical committees, burden on across the whole range of folks that are involved in the commission process. So as we move forward, I think sort of reviewing that pace and the number of assessments and the frequency of reaction to new information is probably one of the foundations that we need to have, because I think moving up and down, whipsawing regulations is probably the worst thing we can do, and but some of the federal cycles right now sort of require us to do that. And any way we can get out of that frequent cycle, I think alleviates pressure across all of our commission system, as well as generates a lot of predictability for the industries that we manage.
So I think this survey has done exactly what it's intended to be by the discussion we've had here. It's given us a chance to have some self-reflection. And I think that points out the importance of trying to take the time to fill out this survey. And I appreciate the people that do take the time, and I appreciate all the comments that we've had here during this discussion about this. And it just shows you the importance of this, and we will continue to do this. So thank you again. And we've got a couple of ideas and thoughts that maybe we can move forward with in the future to try and address some of these issues. So the next agenda item is something that was brought up by the Vice Chairman here, Mr. Gilmore, concerning safe harbor landings. And Tony's going to start out and then with a little overview about this, and then I'll turn it over to Jim to move forward with some possible action.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier this week, I also emailed the draft guiding principles for quota transfers related to safe harbor document out to the policy board, as well as a copy I think was passed around for folks to either share or have of their own. A group of commissioners and 2 law enforcement committee members had a conference call to talk about what the states are doing in terms of what they call safe harbor, and then as well as how they deal with quota transfers that are associated with safe harbor. So we put together this informational document. This is a draft. It is just that, an informational document for states that may be considering a policy regarding safe harbor and landings due to safe harbor circumstances. This is not a policy or requirement to states to implement in any way. Safe harbor, so there were 3 states that actually have policies in place right now regarding safe harbor. So when I pulled together this document, I utilized those 3 states' documents and tried to combine them together to give some general information. Safe harbor provisions is that a port will not reject any deserving, damaged, or needful vessel. The guidance that the states had put together, as well as for this, is not intended to disregard other circumstances that may prevent a vessel from entering into a state port. Vessels seek refuge may be subject to inspection by the host environmental police to make sure there's compliance with all the laws and regulations for that state. Vessels seek safe harbor under the following declared circumstances in many cases: mechanical breakdown, unsafe weather conditions, loss of essential equipment, as well as medical emergencies. In some cases, the states will define what unsafe weather conditions may be in terms of the wind speed and wave height. I tried to determine what that actual specific heights are associated with. It sort of aligns with gale force, but not 100%, and we can't find any other reason why it's there. When vessels come into port, they're asked to identify a series of criteria that are listed in the document, including like the vessel's name, permit numbers, the description of the problem, time of arrival, the amount and type of fish that are on board, and a callback number or some sort of method of contact. Vessels without a license to land in the state, after it's sought safe harbor, should not be allowed to offload fish unless it is determined necessary to stay in port for a period which would result in the fish becoming unmarketable. I think this is the key, very important fact here that states think about when they are creating these policies. In many cases, it seems like in discussions with law enforcement committee that sometimes states come in and claim safe, or a vessel will come in to claim safe harbor, which may or may not actually be safe harbor reasons. It's really that they're just trying to offload some fish so they don't have to go home to their home state. And so in thinking about your rules, you really want to think about making sure you're describing when a vessel would be allowed to offload and when they wouldn't be allowed to offload. Vessels should not be allowed to offload fish unless they have been authorized to do so from the host state. The host state should communicate with the vessel's home state to discuss quota transfers prior to allowing offloading to make sure that it's going to be approved by the home state. Things that you are going to want to talk about is determining what that home state's trip limit is for that vessel, who would cover any overages if the vessel actually contains more than the trip limit that you're going to allow for the offloading, what type of necessary documentation you're going to need to complete the transfer between the two states, as well as a pack-out slip to confirm the landings of the vessel for the home state that's going to be transferring quota back to your state. There are a variety of regulations that the different states are doing when in terms of the actual offloading and landing. Some states will only allow vessels that have sought safe harbor to land their state's trip limit, while other states will allow them to land the home state's trip limit as long as that home state will then transfer the quota to their state. Some states will give away or to charity any fish that are beyond the host state's trip limit, so the fish are forfeited. Authorization to offloading is limited according to the willingness of the vessel's home state to accept the fish under that state's fish allocation. And then some states actually do not grant permission for vessels to land quota in another state due to weather conditions, but they do allow for other safe harbor provisions. So there are a series of regulations that are out there that you should consider. Again, this document is for recommendations. When I did discuss this with the law enforcement committee who met earlier this week, there was mixed reviews about whether or not the commission should even have an informational document from them. There are a couple of members that just felt as though enforcement was communicating with their home states and said this isn't necessary, but that was about it.
Jim?
Thanks, Chairman, and thanks to the work group, and Tony in particular for all the work you did on this. Just on that last note, I think just Tony covered most of everything I was going to say, but just let me put a couple extra points on it. That issue, and if you weren't at the annual meeting when we raised this, was because we've lost court actions because we went in without any kind of a written document, guidance, policy, whatever you want to call it. Essentially, that common sense or reasonable accommodation by our law enforcement and even our staff didn't work. Judges just dismissed it. So from that, we essentially came up with something for New York, and then we figured it would be a similar situation in a lot of the states. You do not want to walk into court, particularly if you get a bad situation like this, with we're good guys and we're trying to manage our resources. So this again is you can't emphasize it enough. This isn't a policy. This is simply a guidance. We came up with, there's a lot of commonalities among the states in terms of these issues. So if it's a weather condition or whatever, we probably just wanted to offer this up so that if an individual state wants to develop something more formally, this is more of a template or a base document that you can use. So if you want to be consistent with the rest of the state, which I think would make a lot of sense with a lot of the other states, I think it gives it more strength. And in particular, even if you don't want to have something, we have a document that you can refer to that if you do go into some formal court thing, whatever, you can say, well, the commission at least has guidance that we would follow. That's a document you can refer to. This does not say that this cannot be modified. Every state is going to have unique circumstances, so this base document can be taken and things can be added to it or taken away from it depending upon that circumstance. But at least having that template, that base document, seemed to be a good idea. So that, I think we'll take questions.
Dave Pierce, you have questions or comments on this? And then Jason?
Yeah, just a comment that appreciate New York's initiative on this. The subcommittee's work is much appreciated as well. Dan and I are in the midst of working with our law enforcement agency to come up with a safe harbor policy, something that can be used to assist law enforcement and all of us deal with the requests that we frequently get during the wintertime, especially when bad weather arises and fishermen fishing on Georges Bank, for example, on the northern edge of Georges Bank, catching summer flounder, have to steam all the way to North Carolina to offload their fish, which is a bit foolish, but nevertheless, that's the way the rules are. Weather gets bad, the engine breaks down, they need safe harbor. So this is good guidance, and we'll use it as we move forward with our law enforcement agents to come up with a way in which we can effectively, deal with all of these requests for safe harbor.
Jason McNamee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Totally agree with everything that Jim said. I think this is a really good idea. I thought I'd offer one nuanced point. What we have found is that first communication about transferring quota, things of that nature, we found it to be more effective if it's actually the vessel captain or owner that makes that communication. So while I agree that in the end it has to be the state agency to state agency that does all the formal logistics, that initial contact I think is more effective coming from the vessel captain or owner that came into port. And so I just want to make sure that the guidance document, if folks were to agree with that, is flexible enough to accommodate all of the communication. Doesn't have to be just between the state agency to state agency.
Jason, is that the vessel captain contacts their home state to see if they'll be willing to transfer quota to another state?
That's correct.
Chris Bat-Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think having these guiding principles is helpful for all the states, to kind of craft their policies that works best for them. We're the one state that doesn't allow vessels to transfer our quota to another, or land our quota in another state due to weather for a couple reasons. The main one is industry's desire to have those boats returned to North Carolina if at all possible, but also to in the past vessels taking advantage of the weather situation. And that's probably the most challenging thing as far as the guiding principles is the criteria. And I think what's given here is a good example of what can be used, but it's just kind of really hard to pinpoint all the reasons why weather could play a role or not as far as returning to the home state. The thing that it's still kind of tough to separate out is vessels seeking safe harbor for safety purposes versus the second step, which is coming in and hoping to land fish in another state due to the circumstances listed. And I'm still kind of struggling to try to figure out how to kind of separate, the first part where it's like, a port will not reject any deserving damage or needful vessel from the circumstances which are kind of more circumstances for requesting permission for landing quota in another state or something like that. But anyways, I think I think this is good, and I think we the more we do this, the more we learn. And North Carolina and Virginia have been doing this for a long time, and just when you think you've kind of seen every situation that can occur, something new pops up, and treating these guiding principles sort of as a living document. If we see things collectively as states that aren't quite working out the way we thought, I guess we always have the opportunity to revisit this.
Richie White and then David Blazer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not having followed this, I don't believe it's an issue in New Hampshire, at least I'm not aware of it. I guess I'm kind of surprised that it's not automatically, doesn't go to the home port state. I mean, here you have a vessel that's regulated and is operating under the regulations of a state that is unloading in another state, obviously due most part to circumstance out of their control. But I think it's creating a problem for the host state that really should be taken care of by the home port state. So, I mean, I think there ought to be an automatic transfer. Shouldn't have to ask, it ought to be automatic. And if problems arise in the regard that they're taking advantage of this, then the home port state needs to figure that out, not the host state. So I guess I'm just kind of surprised that that it's unfolding this way. So as I say, I'm new to it and just getting educated on it, but it just seems backwards to me.
David Blazer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Jim, thank you, and Tony and the work group. It's good to see something in writing that gives us a little bit of guidance, because we've had this issue come up a couple times in our state. We have one small port on the coast in Ocean City, and we could get significant storms that will shoal up and cause our inlet to kind of close down for a little while. So we have used this, after a significant nor'easter where we've got shoaling in our inlet, but we've got boats that are out there. That's been the one case where we've used that. So, we look forward to having these guidelines in, but we'll make it kind of state specific and work through that. So it's good to have something. Appreciate all your work. Thank you, Jim.
David Bush.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that knowledge sharing and sort of cross-loading this information to each of the states is great. The bottom bullet down there is one thing that I think it's pretty valid. I understand that this puts vessels in certain situations, and part of that's on the vessel captain as well, but the states should have a right to say no when they feel that they need to be able to say no. And if you make this an across-the-board thing, or it's automatic, any of y'all that's ever been out on a boat knows how easy it is to have a situation. And it looks legitimate. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to create a situation and save you days of steaming and thousands of gallons of fuel. And I'm not saying that everyone's like that. I work for those guys. But at the same time, the landings flexibility that we discussed yesterday is most flexible under its current situation. And that flexibility has to be able to go from 100 to 0 at the will of the home state. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a good discussion. The only thing that I heard was a potential recommendation to make the first contact to on the onus of the boat captain that would differ with that. Is there any objections to making that change to this non-binding policy guidance at all? Okay, we'll see that changed, and then I'd like to ask Tony how we would propose to just make our commissioners consistently aware of this guidance document should they wish to use it in developing their own state's guidance document.
Thank you, Doug. I think there's there's many options, I guess we could go, but two that really come to mind. One, I can email it to the policy board and then you guys have it. Obviously, that means that you have to remember that you have it as you go forward to creating these documents. So we could also put it on the webpage under the ISFMP policy board and just make sure that it's very, very clear that it is an informational document. I'll put that on the header, and that it's not policy or a requirement in any shape or way. And that I'll probably put on there, also include that individual states create their own safe harbor, transfer, landings policies themselves, and the commission does not do that.
Jim?
I prefer option B. I think that's probably the best way to go about doing it, because that way it is available and it is on those front pages with all the other, sort of guidance documents. And just a quick comment on the underlying theme to both Chris and David's comments was that, there was going to be two bars. The safe harbor is kind of a low bar. The transfer, everything, that's a much higher bar. And the theme is that you're going back to your home state. We're just trying to keep you from having a real safe issue with your crew, whatever. So that, again, that would be my suggestion, was the website.
Okay, any further discussion on this? Okay, we will thank you very much. Good discussion on this, and thank you for developing that, the working group that did that. That's excellent. Next item agenda is MRIP and the transition of the Fishing Effort Survey to the and APIS, excuse me. And we have Dave Van Voorhees here from NOAA Fisheries, and he's got a little presentation. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Doug. And I just want to say I appreciate having an opportunity to address the policy board today and answer your questions that you may have after the presentation. I'm the chief of the Fisheries Statistics Division in the Office of Science and Technology in NOAA Fisheries Headquarters, and we do have responsibility for administering the Marine Recreational Information Program for our Office Director, Ned Sear. So I'll be giving you an update today, largely focusing on the transition that we're making from legacy survey designs to very improved survey designs for recreational fishing. So I think most of you know that we do two surveys to estimate catch typically for recreational fishing. We'll do one survey that's focused on estimating the number of fishing trips that anglers are taking. We call that our effort survey, and it's usually done off-site, either through telephone survey methods or mail survey methods. We also do another survey that's an on-site survey called our Access Point Angler Intercept Survey to get information on what people are catching through direct observations of what they've actually brought back to the dock, and asking them also to report what they caught and released at sea. That information is used to estimate the average number of fish caught per angler fishing trip for all species that anglers are catching. And we then have two estimates, basically, an estimate of total number of trips and an estimate of the average catch per trip. And by multiplying the two together, we can estimate the total catch for any given species in the recreational fishery. In the Marine Recreational Information Program, we've accomplished a lot over the years since 2008. As you know, we established the program after having an initial review by the National Academies of our recreational fisheries surveys across the nation. Everything that we were operating and funding, including some surveys run by state agencies. And we've worked together with all of our state agency partners, interstate commission partners, council partners, to move the program forward to address the recommendations that came out of that review. We established a National Saltwater Angler Registry that is continuing to be improved, and I must say the success of that effort has been largely dependent on the states really stepping up and providing registration and licensing programs that met our requirements for the federal registry. We've also developed improved estimation methods for our on-site survey that properly took into account the complex sampling design of that survey, and we used that to re-estimate catches back through 2004 and developed a calibration for earlier years. Later, we developed an improved sampling design for that on-site survey, which I'll say a little bit more about today. And then we've also developed a new mail survey design as an improvement over the legacy telephone survey based on random digit dialing that we've done for many years. We have that ready to implement, but I'll be telling you more about the plan for how we're going forward to implement that mail survey. More recently, we've been working with our partners to develop regional implementation plans that identify what needs to be done moving forward within each region, what all the partners want to accomplish in terms of improved survey designs, and what we want to implement moving forward. Those are in progress at the moment. We've also been working on developing a new strategic plan for the program, which is now posted on our website for feedback and input from everybody. So please go and review that and let us know if you see any reasons for changes. We had a second review done by the National Academies that you heard about. Dr. Cynthia Jones came here. She's the co-chair of the committee that reviewed the program and addressed you at your last meeting. That review I'll say a little bit about in particular for the later part of the presentation. The National Academy's review basically pointed out that the collection of recreational fishery data is extremely difficult. It's not easy. So advanced survey methods and complex statistical analyses are needed. I think one comment that Dr. Jones made was that it's actually more complicated than rocket science. I think that's just a humorous way of pointing out that it isn't easy to design and conduct these surveys to get what we're trying to accomplish. We did get positive feedback from the National Academy's review. I'm not going to dwell on that. I will focus more specifically on the two major surveys that we're transitioning to. But additional challenges do remain for us, and there are a number of recommendations in the report from the National Academies of things we can do to further improve on the very improved designs that we've already developed. I'm going to talk about, first of all, the access point angle intercept survey. National Academies said that the new design we've developed, the new estimation and sampling designs for that survey, are a substantial improvement over what we used for MRFs in earlier years. We've greatly reduced the potential for bias in that survey by having strict adherence to formal probability sampling protocols, limiting decision-making by samplers. They can no longer decide when to go to a site or when to leave a site to go to another site. There's more strict protocols in place. We've also expanded temporal coverage, so we're getting intercepts of trips returning throughout the day, not just during the peak activity period of the day, but trips returning at nighttime as well as off-peak daytime hours. The site time assignments are actually completed without rescheduling because we have a sampling approach that's making sure that we're taking into account the constraints of the folks that are actually doing the survey. Very importantly, now on the Atlantic coast, we have all the data collection for this survey being conducted by state agency personnel and ACCSP. We're very happy with the way that's going. The new fishing effort survey that we've developed is actually a mail survey designed to replace the legacy survey, the random digit dialing telephone survey that we did for many years since 1981, the beginning of MRFs. The National Academies pointed out that the methodologies that we're using for that approach are major improvements over the legacy approach. And I just want to point out the major reasons why we see it as a better way to go is that we get much better coverage. Through a mail survey approach, we can reach households that still have landline phones and answer that phone, but we can also reach households that only have cell phones and only answer cell phones, even though they might have a landline phone. We get higher response rates from mail surveys now. The response rates we're getting are on the order of 40%. The random digit dialing telephone surveys now get response rates below 10%. We have a much better chance of reaching people who fish because we're taking advantage of the National Saltwater Angler Registry that's been developed, and we're using that so that we can actually sample households that have addresses that are in the registry at a higher level than households that don't have license holders, basically. In the pilot studies that were conducted leading up to the development of this design, we also found that we got very different estimates of the number of trips that anglers are taking. They're considerably higher than what we got from the Coastal Household Telephone Survey. So as we transition to new surveys, improved surveys, it's very important that we take into account that we could be causing a major disruption to stock assessments and the management process. As you know, stock assessments and fisheries management rely heavily on having comparable time series of recreational catch statistics. And if you change to a new methodology, improve a methodology, it's likely that you will get consistently different estimates from the new method than what you got from the old method. So it's important to develop a calibration, a way to be able to convert from the old currency to the new currency, so we can actually revise historical estimates to match what we're going to get with the new survey designs moving forward. That gives you a comparable time series of information for assessments and management. So we need to do this not only to account for the new male survey that we're going to implement, the fishing effort survey, but also to take into account the changes we made in the access point angler intercept survey to improve that. So to do it, we thought we needed to work together with all of our partners to plan a transition for how we're going to actually implement and account for the changes that come from the new surveys. In order to do that, we reached out to all our partners. We got representatives from our regional offices and science centers, from the councils, from the interstate commissions, and from a number of state agencies to form a transition team. That team has developed a plan for how we're actually going forward to implement the new surveys, and it will ensure that the new numbers are incorporated into stock assessments and management in a timely fashion, accounting for the important changes. So this gives you an idea what the schedule looks like that the team developed. We set up a 3-year benchmarking period for doing the legacy telephone survey, continuing that, of course, alongside of the new mail survey that we developed. That's from 2015 through 2017. In 2017, we're actually moving forward to evaluate a calibration model that's been developed for the transition from the phone survey to the mail survey. That's going to be peer-reviewed in a workshop that we scheduled for the last week of June. And the model is actually going to be shared with the transition team within the next few weeks. We're hoping if the model is approved by the peer review that we will be able to go forward and use the model to actually produce revised effort statistics based on the first 2 years of the side-by-side data. That will give everybody a chance to look at what the changes will look like as we move forward into 2018. Later in 2017, we're also going to complete evaluation of a calibration model to account for the changes in the intercept survey. That model will then be peer-reviewed early in 2018, so that when we have final numbers for 2017, we will be able to use both calibration models to re-estimate historical catch and effort and have those revised numbers available for folks doing assessments by the middle of 2018. I just wanted to make a quick mention of other work that we're doing, because everything I've talked about up to this point is focused largely on how we estimate effort and catch for private boat fishing and shore fishing. The new mail survey is not going to be used to estimate for hire trips, charter boat, head boat trips. We have other surveys that focus on for hire sector. We are doing work in MRIP to look for improved ways to do data collection for the for-hire fishery. The ultimate goal is to develop and certify designs for electronic trip reporting programs, because we know that in 3 of the regions at least, Gulf, South Atlantic, Mid-Atlantic, there's a lot of interest in moving in that direction. So we've been funding studies that are using a number of very, very important components. Electronic reporting, but also methods for very good compliance monitoring, make sure everybody's actually participating. And finally, a very important component is dockside sampling that can be used for validation of the self-reported data. That's going to be a move away from what we're currently doing, which is just the for-hire telephone survey that we're using to estimate number of trips for charter boats, for charter boat anglers, and the Northeast Vessel Trip Reports are also used in our effort estimates. And finally, the Access Point Angler Intercept Survey is used to estimate the average catch. This last slide is just to give you an idea of other things we're working on. I think in the interest of moving things along, because you're already kind of late on your schedule, I'm not going to go through this slide in detail, but I'll just leave it up there, and I'll be glad to take any questions people may have.
Any questions for Dave? Oh boy, okay. Well, I'll start in this side of the room, we'll go around. John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the update, Dave. We heard at the last meeting the National Academy's review of the MRIP. The survey is obviously a great design, and yet if you had been here yesterday, you would have heard just heaped on criticism of the results that are actually coming out of it. Do you have any way of plans to some way maybe ground truth some of the numbers you get out of this? Because a lot of the numbers do seem to defy belief.
Well, the surveys we're doing do have limitations. One of the important recommendations that came out of the National Academy's review was they really thought we should take a close look with all of our partners at whether or not the MRIP design is sufficient to manage recreational fisheries the way people want to manage the recreational fishery. Now, that can vary. Different people have different ideas about how best to manage it. But what they focused on in particular was if people are trying to manage the recreational fishery in season, similar to what's done for the commercial fishery, then the survey designs we're working with may not be adequate to support that. That's what they're recommending us to take a close look at. And if people actually want to manage fisheries in that way, and I'm not saying that is the way that everybody really wants to do it, then we need to take a closer look at some alternative methodologies for managing the fisheries. It's extremely, as I think most of you understand, it's extremely complex to be able to produce recreational catch statistics similar to what we do for commercial fishing, because we can't census everybody, and we don't have a way, even if we tried to require them to report everything, we don't have a way of checking up on everybody that's adequate to make sure that we're actually getting complete reporting.
Roy Miller.
Nice to see you again, Dave. Refusal rates have been historically a problem in our state, particularly with the for-hire sector. I'm curious if there's been any moves to attempt to overcome that particular obstacle among some of the for-hire captains that refuse either to allow surveyors on their vessel or refuse to cooperate with the surveys altogether. Thank you.
Certainly I'm aware, Roy, of that issue, and have personally dealt with it in the past, in Lewis, actually. I made a visit down there years ago. It's difficult sometimes to be able to keep the cooperation that we need to get really good data from the surveys. But we do continue to look at that and to try to improve our communications, to get out and talk to the folks, go out on the docks and actually pay visits. So I think that's something that's duly noted. I think we should follow up on the issues in Delaware. I'd like to talk some more with you about that.
David Bush.
Thank you for the presentation. Quick question for you. Up and down the coast, there are mixed reviews as to obviously not just MRIP, but recreational reporting and some way to gather that data. You know, you have recreational fishermen that are, sure, I'll put an app on my cell phone and report every time I go out, and some guys, they don't need to know what I'm doing. So you do get a mixed review, but given the possibility of whether it be voluntary or state-led programs to provide recreational data in some form or another, I understand that there would be a calibration issue trying to convert it into something useful to MRIP, but one, if you could maybe just briefly tell us, you know, where that sort of stands. And then the second question, I think was kind of already asked, and that's when you get these two intercepts that equate to catching more than the biomass on the planet has, what are we going to do with that? Thank you.
So there's two questions there. I'm going to try the first one and then come for the second one. I think Dr. Jones actually addressed that first question somewhat when she was here at the last meeting. It certainly is possible to design a data collection program that has folks reporting through cell phone apps, you know, on their trips. The key is to make sure that everybody that's participating in the program is actually reporting everything they do. You don't want to just get the positive trips and not the negative trips, because then you'll estimate average catches way too high. So it's also difficult because of the sheer number of people participating in the private boat fishery, for example. If you tried a census type of approach, that would be extremely difficult to manage to make sure everybody's actually in compliance. You can, however, develop a sampling approach where if you recruit a panel through a probability sampling approach and you have that panel reporting everything that they're doing, that certainly has potential. The key there is you need to know how to weight the data that you're getting from a representative sample of the population in order to estimate what's going on in the total population. If you don't have a probability sampling approach, you can't be sure you have a good cross-section in your panel. So if it's just a volunteer panel, you might get volunteers that are better at fishing than the non-volunteers, and you might end up overestimating your catches as a result of that. So it's certainly possible, but it's going to be extremely difficult to develop a system for private boat fishing, for shore fishing, that actually meets the standards for, you know, statistical surveys, and so you can be sure you're producing unbiased estimates. And we are supporting projects. MRIP is supporting some pilot studies that have been testing out use of cell phone apps for reporting. There was actually one study done in Florida that compared data being captured through cell phone apps with data collected in the MRIP intercept survey in Florida for some regions of the state. Your second question was getting at how to deal with these numbers for, I think what you're looking at is low activity time periods. For example, November-December period. We had a number that most of you know about for black sea bass in wave 6 of 2016 that was much higher than what we saw in the earlier years for that same time period. We looked very closely into the data to see if anything was done incorrectly in terms of sampling procedures, also to look at the data itself to see if any of the values were out of range of what would be believable for an angler fishing trip. And we weren't really able to find anything that was incorrect that would have, necessarily caused an error in estimation. But I want to point out it's very important to recognize that in low activity periods, that is very difficult for the survey design to produce a really precise estimate. On the intercept survey, we have a lot of intercept assignments that are occurring, but many of them are not succeeding in intercepting any trips because nobody was coming back on that day at that site. The sample we do get of angler trips is smaller for those low activity time periods than it is for the more active time periods. So the effective sample size being small causes us to have an estimate that can be quite variable from year to year. Some years it's high, some years it's low. The real value is probably somewhere in between, or maybe we occasionally hit around the mark, but that's a problem in terms of sampling surveys, the effective sample size. On the effort side, it's the same problem because we're contacting a lot of households to find out how many trips people took in the household, but there's a lot of households during those low activity periods that don't have anybody reporting trips. So the hits we do have are the ones we have to rely on to provide data to produce our estimates. So the effort estimates can also fluctuate from year to year in these low activity time periods. But as you look towards the middle of the year, the much more active time periods, there's a lot less room for variability in the estimates because we have much larger effective sample sizes.
Andrew Shields.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. Just a quick question. Do you have a estimate of the participation rate in the National Angler Registry, especially on the East Coast?
I think what you're getting at is do we actually have everybody registered, right? And I think the answer to that question is it varies a lot from state to state based on what we've seen so far from the mail survey that we're conducting alongside of the current phone survey. I don't really have numbers I can share with you right now, but I can just tell you it does vary quite a bit. So in some states, it looks like there's suggestion that we may be missing as much as 40% of the participants just based on the registry alone. Other states, it's less than that. So I think there's still work to be done to improve our registry, working together with our partners to find ways to get folks registered who may not be required to pay for a license, but we want to at least get them in the registry so that we can have the ability to survey them at a higher level than folks that aren't participating in the fishery.
Jim Gilmore.
Thanks, Chairman. And Dave, I'd like to thank you. I think you have the hardest job in NOAA fisheries, quite frankly, because you know, I know you guys. This is probably one of the most difficult things. That rocket science analogy, I think, is correct. And you know, as much you get beat up a lot, but just I know you guys are trying your hardest to do this. And MRIP isn't a four-letter word in the bad sense. Hopefully we'll get to it. Just an issue, and it's more of a comment, is that, in the ideal world, if we had done this thing, we would have, developed it, tested it, modified it, and then rolled it out. But of course, because of the circumstance, it was rolled out, and we're testing it, modifying it, live. And the problem comes down to be the anomalies. Right now, that thanks for getting on the phone with us a couple of weeks ago on black sea bass, because that pretty much explained it. And again, I applaud you guys. You're doing a great job. But we're in that mode where the operation was a success, but the patient died is the bigger problem. Those anomalies come out. And what happens is, what happened yesterday. We've got this number that was suspect, but because of the fear that, well, that's a number, NOAA fisheries coming down with the hammer with draconian measures, we did what, yesterday was, I think, an extreme overreaction on black sea bass of what we're doing. We're reacting to that, and that's causing a problem. So as we move forward, we really need some judgment or whatever, some kind of way to deal with that, because again, we just, I think, impacted a fishery dramatically that did not have to happen, simply because it's a work in progress and those anomalies are really killing us. So whatever you and John and everybody else can do to try to get us to deal with that as we move forward, to smooth that out, I think would be a big help. Thanks.
Well, Jim, thanks for the kind words, but I certainly understand how difficult it is to manage recreational fisheries, and especially to try to do it with estimates that in some cases aren't very precise for some stocks. And it's a multi-purpose survey that we're doing. We're trying to cover everything. We're trying to get the best estimates we can for all different species that are being caught, but And we're also in this situation where the managers are having to manage fisheries with annual catch limits. And you have to use whatever number is available. And we're trying to do the best we can to provide good numbers, but in some cases, the estimates we provide for some stocks are not very precise, and they're going to be subject to questions, because we don't have enough data on that particular stock to actually produce a really strong, highly defensible, precise estimate. And the other problem we have is, as I alluded to earlier, is that at an annual level, we can do a good job of getting precise estimates for different stocks that are being managed, many stocks. But when you get down to the 2-month wave level and you're tracking wave by wave as you go through the year, that becomes much more difficult. Our high activity waves, those wave level estimates are generally pretty precise, but the low activity waves early in the year, late in the season, if you're just looking at that 1-2 month period, that estimate is not going to be as precise as what we get at the annual level or what we get for the high activity waves. So that I think we need to be taking into consideration in terms of how we use the numbers. And I think we're looking to put together a workshop probably this fall, working with several of the councils and ISFMP to start taking a closer look at how we deal with imprecise estimates for the recreational fishery and how that matches up with a management strategy, and looking for other ways to improve the precision of estimates by using data maybe from more than 1 year for some stocks instead of relying just on the current year data. A number of other alternatives are going to be explored.
Mark Alexandra.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David, I'm glad you're here. It's always nice to hear what you have to say, and I always enjoy your explanations for things. I have 2 questions. The first is, a moment ago you answered a question regarding a mobile app and the importance of differentiating or accounting for positive and negative trips. In the fishing effort survey, the mail survey, how do you account for or confirm that people that have had a trip in the previous wave are more or less apt to report or respond to the survey than people that did not have a positive trip?
Yeah, that's very important. I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the major things we were focused on in developing the new mail survey was this potential for what we call a non-response bias, that the people who respond to the survey could be different than people who don't respond to the survey. If you have that situation, that can create a bias in your estimates, because we're surveying basically through a mail approach. We're surveying households. Okay, so we're trying to find out for all the households that receive the mail survey, get trip data from all the residents of that household for the last 2 months. It's very important that the people who didn't take any fishing trips also fill out and return the questionnaire. Otherwise, we're going to overestimate the number of trips being taken by all households. So the way the survey is, the way the questionnaire is actually designed, we include questions that are not about fishing, that are about weather, other aspects of NOAA, that unrelated to fishing. The whole idea was to try to make the questionnaire more salient to people who don't fish, so that they would actually respond to questions and send the questionnaire back. We also have on there a place for people to record saltwater fishing trips if they took any, but that's just a portion of the total questionnaire. And that was done to look at that, to try to improve the response rates for people that didn't fish as well as people that did fish. We also did follow-up studies, which we call follow-up non-response surveys, where you basically take the addresses that didn't respond and send them another questionnaire with a larger incentive. We normally include a $2 incentive with the mail survey, a larger incentive and easier ways to respond through phone or mail. And those follow-up studies did not show a non-response bias. We were able to compare those who did not respond initially with those who did respond, and did not see statistically significant difference. But we have had a strong recommendation from the National Academy's review to continue to do those non-response follow-ups as a standard part of the survey. So we are going to be doing that when we rely on the mail survey alone starting in 2018.
Thank you. And my other question was, in our discussion yesterday with fluke scup and sea bass, there was a statement that the VTR data is folded in to the estimates at the end of the year, and that was a little vague to me. I wasn't sure what end of the year meant. Is that data accounted for or used prior to the release of the preliminary data, or between the release of the preliminary and the final data?
This is an area we're looking to improve, working together with our partners in GARFO for the regional office that conduct the VTR program. What we currently do is we use the VTR effort data to improve our effort estimates for the charter boats and the head boats. We haven't traditionally been able to get that data complete until the end of the year. So what we've done is on the preliminary estimates, we're just relying on the for-hire telephone survey data to estimate effort for all boats, federally permitted as well as state registered boats. Then at the end of the year, when the VTR data was available and considered to be pretty complete, we then incorporated that, integrated it with our for-hire survey data so that we could get a separate estimate for the federally permitted boats that came from the VTRs for their trips. And then the non-federally permitted boats, we relied on the for-hire telephone survey data to estimate those trips. And that's why the estimates change a bit between preliminary and final for the charter boats and the head boats. We haven't used the catch data from the VTRs. The decision we made years ago was to continue to rely on the actual intercepts where there's direct observations by a sampler of the catch that's being brought back to the dock. But what we're moving towards doing is getting the VTR data on a bi-monthly basis so we can incorporate the VTR data into the preliminary estimates so there won't be as much of a change between preliminary and final estimates at the end of the year.
Adam Nowalski.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here today. The presentation as a member of the recreational community who's made a number of inquiries to the S&T office, never found your staff to be anything other than completely professional and helpful in all inquiries, and appreciate that. When management saw the transition from MRFs to MRIP a number of years ago, I'm not sure if promises are the right term, but I'll certainly say expectations or hopes with regards to timeliness of when the data might be presented, with regards to possibly getting information on a monthly basis as opposed to every 2-month wave basis. Certainly the expectation was reduced confidence intervals. We certainly haven't been able to get any of that on paper. In practice, that's not to say the numbers aren't actually more accurate, but a lot of those management expectations and hopes to improve how we use the data haven't been met. As a result of that, earlier this morning we had discussion about our commissioner survey in recent years, some declines in expectations largely driven by recreational problems, which are in large part how we use the data, and you touched on some of that in your presentation. I think that slowed down management's willingness to revise the management process and how we react to the recreational data. I think we gave it a chance and realized we still have a way to go. My concern now is 4 or 5 years after the fact of bringing MRIP online. We're bringing all these re-estimations to the table. My concern is management is going to latch onto it for another 4 or 5 years and say, let's give it a chance now, as opposed to really looking at our practices and how we deal with it. So could you maybe compare what expectations management might have relative to these re-estimations compared to what the expectations were from the MRF's MRIP transition, and what your thoughts are about how management should really be changing how we use the data versus just expecting data is going to fix all our problems?
There's a few questions there I'm going to take a shot at, and then if I miss something, please let me know, and I'll try to respond if I missed any of the questions there. But one thing I want to point out, the National Academy's review actually made a recommendation that we strongly reconsider the recall period that we're using for our effort surveys, which has been a 2-month interval ever since 1981. And we're certainly aware that there's interest in getting more timely numbers. We actually had an MRIP funded a timeliness workshop a few years ago that looked at this, at the ways we can actually move things up to have updates during the season more frequently than every 2 months, and to shorten the time interval between when the data is actually collected and when we produce the estimates. So we are trying to improve in that direction, and we actually have a pilot study we've conducted with the new mail survey that uses a 1-month recall rather than 2 months. We're still in the process of evaluating the results of that. So National Academies wasn't aware of that pilot study, but we think it's a pretty strong indication that we can go to monthly estimates. It's going to be somewhat a resource issue in terms of funding available, but it's certainly doable. And we think we're getting results that are fairly consistent with what we're getting currently with the 2-month interval. So that would be a concern, because if you got different estimates from monthly than what you get from bi-monthly, it might be a need for another calibration. So we think it looks pretty positive that we could actually go to monthly with the mail survey and get results that are consistent with what we're getting bi-monthly. As far as settling for what we have now, I think I certainly hear that. I mean, we always need to be looking to advance forward. That was strongly endorsed by the National Academies. We want to continue to do research for ways to improve our surveys moving forward. One good example is that was actually recommended in the National Academies review is looking at going from a mail response approach to allowing people to respond to something they receive in the mail by reporting it through a website where we could actually ask more questions. It would be cheaper. You could get a faster response than waiting for something to come back in the snail mail. And we think that's going to be highly likely that we'll be able to go in that direction in the near future, but the expert consultants we're working with are saying we're not quite ready for that yet, because there's still a lot of people that would not respond if they had to do it through a website. And I think that's probably people in my generation and older to a large extent. But I think as we get out of the picture, I think that type of approach may be more feasible. So that's just an example, but we always need to be looking for other ways to collect the data to improve, like for the for-hire sector, going to electronic reporting programs, making sure that we have a good design for how that's actually set up so that we can be sure we're getting unbiased estimates. It's going to be more expensive. We'll have to find the resources to do it, but if people want to go there, I mean, we can look at that. We can do different approaches. I think a lot of it is resource dependent. The precision issues that you brought up, how do we get tighter confidence intervals on the estimates? It's largely how much data we collect. It's how much we can afford to collect. The surveys that we're doing now are actually more expensive than they were 10 years ago. There are minimum pay rates, for the samplers that entered into the picture several years ago, and have really increased the cost. So, yeah, I mean, we need to work together and continue to look for ways to improve and get the resources needed to actually support new approaches.
David Pierce, and then I have one other question after this, and then we'll continue, we'll move on.
Yeah, thank you, David. Thank you for your insights. Appreciate that. Also appreciate your focusing on the imprecise estimates of the MRIP. And fortunately, this commission appears to be going in a direction that's very consistent with what you just mentioned, and that is, instead of being wedded to point estimates of harvest, we're looking at the range around that, around those point estimates, the PSC, and if we're within the range, that's good enough. At least we seem to be going in that direction. We've already moved in that direction with one species, and I hope we continue to go in that way. Wave 6 black sea bass, it's been said it's an anomaly. I don't think it is, based upon what I've seen. I would like, at some time, for an official statement from MRIP regarding that particular wave. Was it anomalous, or is it really an estimate that we should be using, because it's ruling the day now, and I think it will rule the day as we move forward into the rest of 2017 going into 18. It has tremendous implications for what happens in 2018. And with that said, the technical committee gave a presentation yesterday, and they indicated that they had a problem with the MRIP information specific to their evaluating black sea bass and the actual numbers for the different waves, New York being obviously in the crosshairs. The report given to us said, and this is from the technical committee, it should be noted that there are several components to how the Marine Recreational Information Program developed the 2016 harvest estimates that remain unclear to the TC, specifically the weighting of intercepts, harvest by mode, and how the proportional standard error is calculated. Requests have been made to MRIP staff to further explain how the harvest estimates were generated, with many of those questions remaining unanswered. So that's a great concern. Now, what can be done for the technical committee's concerns to be addressed so that they actually can get under the hood to help us better understand the MRIP findings, such as the proportional standard error, how is it calculated? All of this really plays into very difficult management decisions we have to make, and I know you're doing the best job you can possibly do. That's evident from all your responses. So what can we do to get this kind of information that the technical committee requires for our benefit?
So, Dave, we do already have a lot of information on our website about how the surveys are done, how the estimation is done. However, we have been working very hard on upgrading that to make sure that we have good descriptions of the new methods, the improvements we've implemented over the last few years. And John Foster just reported to me this week that we're close to having that completed, and it will be reviewed, obviously, to make sure that everything is everything is clear in there. But we're going to be posting that on our website, I think, within the next few months, and that new documentation would be available for any of the folks on the technical side to look at, to understand how they could replicate basically what we're producing in terms of estimates.
But thank you very much. But beyond going to the website, there are actually, I don't really know. I'm asking the question: who talks? Who are the people who can actually communicate with the technical committee, and so there can be a good discussion person to person, as opposed to going to a website and wandering through the website trying to find the answers to these questions?
Yeah, well, I have a branch chief for my recreational branch now, as of last June. John Foster is my branch chief for the recreational branch, and he's really our expert in terms of the statistical side of things. And we have several other statisticians on the staff who are also expert in this, so I think we can certainly set something up where John could come and meet with whoever is interested in digging into the details. We'll be glad to do that.
Okay, thank you. I have one question, and it relates to if you could have the slide put up on the transition, which is the primary purpose of your discussion here today. And I need to have that put up so that I can read it, because I don't have your presentation. So the intent is that with the new effort estimate survey, that we would be discontinuing the coastal household survey, telephone survey by 2018, is it? Is that the... and my question here is that clearly there's a process that's been developed here for transitioning to it and incorporating the new estimates from the for-hire, using the for-hire and the new APIS into our assessments, because we clearly have as of 2018, we're going to be using those revised estimates, which are going to more than likely increase the recreational catches of some species, and those are the estimates we're going to be used to monitor whether we're in the ACLs. So my question is the plan still the plan here still intended to have these estimates incorporated into the stock assessments that have significant recreational catches by 2018, and in time for councils to potentially modify their specifications before the 2018 estimates are used to calculate or to determine whether they're within the ACL. Is that clear? And I can ask...
I'm going to start. I think I'm going to start for Dave. I'm on the transition team, and I don't want to force Dave into, like, when are we putting information into assessments, because that's not necessarily Dave's role. Dave's role is to provide us with the data that we're going to put into the assessments in the timely fashion. So if we do have meet these milestones and these calibration workshops occur in a timely fashion and we get the data out, then we can start to incorporate the information into the assessments as they come up. So for example, striped bass assessment will be coming up in 2018, and we are going to be right on the line of when that data becomes available and when we need it, like drop dead moment need it for the assessment to be able to incorporate it in. So we're going to do the best that we can as long as that data become available when they're ready. And Dave has said that he's going to try to provide us with some information so that we can start to see how we think the model may need to be tweaked or how indices might need to be adjusted, so we can do some of that work ahead of time. In terms of when all the other assessments will be occurring, especially for assessments that are jointly managed, like summer flounder, scup, and black sea bass. We do those assessments incorporation with those schedules anyway, incorporated into the NRCC review, and that assessment schedule is, looking at both the Mid-Atlantic Council, New England Council, and the Commission's assessment needs. We have put time on the docket for recreational species in the fall of 2018 because we knew that these data would not be available until summertime. It takes time to make changes to the assessments themselves. In some cases, length frequency indices may need to be adjusted. They may need to be adjusted throughout the time series, and that is not a small task to undertake. And so depending on how many changes need to be made into the model will depend on how long it takes us to get it out and then given to us for peer review. There are also calibrations, and Dave, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but in order to adjust the data back to the old method so that if we haven't made changes to the ACLs and the AMs, yet we can still go back and compare the data, so we're comparing apples to apples and not apples to bananas, so that we're able to manage appropriately with the numbers that we have available to us.
Very good, Tony, that's right. And Doug, you had asked, we definitely will not be doing the telephone survey in 2018. We'll just be doing the mail survey at that point. I think it's safe to say we would probably have a difficult time getting OMB to actually approve continuing to do a random digital dialing household survey. We had to convince them that it was necessary to do it over the last 3 years for this benchmarking that we're doing to go to a new mail survey. And as Tony pointed out, the estimates we're producing from the mail survey will be able to be converted into the same currency as what we would have gotten with the telephone survey based on the same calibration model that we're using.
Okay, thank you very much, Dave, for your very informative talk. I appreciate this effort. Obviously, it's been we've been going through some difficult challenges in managing our species, and the data that comes out of MREP is very important to our management, and I appreciate the efforts to try and improve it and transition to the new methods here that will hopefully provide us with better information with which to manage. We are going to do a little reorganization because of the lateness of the hour in our agenda items. We are going to skip over at this point items 10 through 13, and we're going to go directly to non-compliance findings. And we have a motion that was put together by the Fluke Black Sea Bass and Scup Board. And since our chairman is not here and our vice chairman is not here, I'm going to ask Dave Pierce, the original maker of the motion, to bring that motion forward from the board.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This motion is in the form of a template, kind of standard language for non-compliance rulings. So it's been modified, obviously, to deal with the specific issue pertaining to non-compliance. So I will read it into the record. And so I would move on behalf of the Summer Flounder, Scup, and Black Sea Bass Board, recommends the ISFMP Policy Board find the state of New Jersey be out of compliance for not fully and effectively implementing and enforcing Addendum 28 to the Summer Flounder, Scup, and Black Sea Bass Fishery Management Plan if the state does not implement the following measures by May 21, 2017. Shore mode for Island Beach State Park only, 17-inch minimum size limit, 2 fish possession limit, and 128-day open season. Delaware Bay only, west of the Colregs line. 18-inch minimum size limit, 3 fish possession limit, and 128-day open season. All other marine waters east of the Colregs line, 19-inch minimum size limit, 3 fish possession limit, and 120-day open season. The implementation of these regulations is necessary to achieve the conservation goals and objectives of the FMP to end overfishing of the summer flounder stock. In order to come back into compliance, the state of New Jersey must implement all of the measures listed above as contained in Addendum 28 to the Summer Flounder FMP.
Thank you, Dave. This is a motion by the board, so it does not need a second. Is there any discussion on this motion? I'd first like to recognize Robert Boyles, and then I'll go to further discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Give me just a second, I'm sorry. Mr. Chairman, this is the list of items that need to occur in order for New Jersey to come back in, to be in compliance. Is that correct?
This was the original motion that was made by the board prior to New Jersey putting forward their conservation equivalency proposal that the board is currently in the process of getting technical evaluation on. So this is the original motion based on what came out under the original addendum.
Okay, apologies, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that. If that's the case, and under the, I understand that New Jersey does have a proposal that will be considered Does this motion need to be modified slightly?
I believe it should somehow take into consideration their the potential for their conservational equivalency proposal being used to bring them back into compliance, depending on the board evaluation.
Mr. Chairman, then I'd offer a motion to slightly modify with the words, if the state does not implement the following measures or those approved by the by the board.
Robert, can you see that last line on that page?
Hang on. Yeah, okay. You can see that. I can see that now. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. But I would make that motion to add those words to recognize that there is a conservation equivalency proposal that the state of New Jersey has suggested.
Is there a second to this motion to amend? Andrew Shields is seconded, and I'll read it in to the record just so that we have this official wording in here, and then we'll take discussion on the motion to amend, and then also the main motion. So the motion to amend to include or equivalent measures, and that was made by Mr. Boyles and seconded by Mr. Shields. Now we'll have discussion on the motion. I believe we had Adam Nowalski.
Thank you. The other element of the original motion, I think, that bears discussion here is the date element by May 21st. In all likelihood, that board meeting, the board meeting may not occur by that time frame. I don't know if staff has an idea, if they've been erasing other things in their calendar and writing new things in, if they have any input on when that occur, if we need to put something relative to some other occurrence as opposed to that fixed date in the motion.
I believe our executive director can give an outline of the process of an out of compliance motion that may be able to address some of your concerns with this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Adam, I guess the thinking of or my interpretation of the thinking of the Summer Flounder Board yesterday was that they wanted to ensure that New Jersey was going to take action by the 21st. Because as it stands now, with nothing else on the books, as of May 21st, the New Jersey regulations revert to 2016, and they'd have a size limit that's smaller than what's required by the addendum and a bag limit that's higher. But now we've started down this road of conservation equivalency. And I guess the question now becomes for the board, does the board still want staff to submit a letter on May 21st, or does the board want to have some of the technical committee review and Summer Flounder Board subsequent review play out before letters are sent? It's really up to this group, because if we send a letter on the 21st, are we sending a letter because the regulations that are in place are the 2016 regulations, or are they the new conservation equivalency regulations that have not been reviewed and approved? And those are kind of two different things, right? It's a process question for the group, and I think you can, and there's two paths. One is they can maintain the 21st because that's what we know right now, or they can make an assumption about how New Jersey is going to progress with their conservation equivalency proposal and defer transmission of letters until those next steps have played out. And I can't decide for the policy board, obviously, on what you want, but those seem to be the two options in front of the group right now. Either setting the date now or setting a process that will, essentially put New Jersey on notice that the intention is to find them out of compliance if they haven't implemented the appropriate regulations after the technical committee and board process.
Follow up, Adam, and then I have Kelly Dennett.
So perhaps maybe we quickly dispense with this motion, which I think there's likely support for around the table. We get that original motion back up on the screen and decide what other changes might need to be made.
Discussion on this amendment to the main motion. David Bush.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only thing I see maybe is the motion to amend to include or equivalent measures. Those equivalent measures would be determined by who according to this amendment. It does not state. Maybe it might be appropriate to state it. Thank you.
So specifically add some words about or equivalent measures that are approved by the Summer Flounder Board. Is the seconder okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Further discussion on the motion to amend. Kelly?
Thank you, Chair. So I think just before we move forward with looking at this motion, I wanted to clarify a little bit on the process perspective. So I think right now we're in a very challenging situation with a lot of moving parts. We're attempting to craft a non-compliance finding sort of proactively in a certain way. In terms of we don't actually know what the technical committee is going to say. We don't yet know what the species board is going to do with that information. And so therefore it's a little bit, from a process perspective, it's challenging for the board to find non-compliance in advance of actually having those decisions. Historically, when we've done non-compliance findings, it's generally been with an assumption that a person or a state is not putting in place any measures. And in this particular case, we've heard very clearly from New Jersey that they are going to put in place measures next week. And it remains to be seen whether those measures will be conservationally equivalent or not. And so I think from our perspective, while these amendments potentially help, I think we may find ourselves in a situation where the board would have to take an additional action following the results of the TC review and the Species Management Board decision to actually move forward a non-compliance finding to the agency. And just while I have the floor, I just would remind folks, that there are two prongs to the non-compliance finding when it comes to the agency. The first is whether they've failed to implement the measures as articulated by the Commission, and the second is whether those measures are necessary for the conservation of the fishery. And so I think the TC review would play an important part in the Commission's decision-making and therefore the rationale that it might put forward to the agency of whether those measures are in fact necessary for the conservation of the fishery. Because we're now working under an assumption that New Jersey is going to implement the proposal they've put forward and not the status quo, which might be two very different questions and two very different results in terms of looking at the need for the conservation for the fishery. So I just want to put that out there for consideration of the board as they're looking at this amendment and then the main motion as a whole.
So I would like to see, and I'll take your comment here, Robert, in a minute, that maybe if we work on this motion, decide where we want to add this particular amendment to the non-compliance finding, and then potentially, if there are other modifications that the board feels need to be put in to clarify exactly when any non-compliance determination would come out, we can take that up in subsequent amendments to the motion. So Is there any objection to that, or taking up this motion and then dispensing with this motion either up or down, and then taking any subsequent modifications to deal with the exact timing of the any potential non-compliance finding? Okay. Do you need time to caucus here? It seems like there's only, with a couple of delegations, there's only we don't have a full delegation, but I'll give you 30 seconds to caucus on this particular amendment. Okay, are you ready to vote? All those in favor of this amendment to the non-compliance finding, please raise your right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All opposed? Any abstentions? 1, 2, 3, 4. Any no votes? Okay, this motion to amend has passed 12 to 0 to 4 to 0. Now, are there any other amendments to this, to the main motion that any board member would like to make? Adam. Whoop. I hit the wrong button. You're on.
Mike Luisi had a lot of success with that technique last meeting with me. So, again, I'll just come back to my last comment that I don't think the date at this time is the appropriate path forward for this board. I think it needs to be something relative to the pending actions that we know are in play. And I'd leave it up to the rest of the board to determine what that is. I would offer that the right time sensitive criteria right now is that this finding would come forth after the Summer Flounder Board decided, should they decide, that New Jersey's alternative proposal was not accepted.
He just made a motion. Did you catch that motion? Okay. I'm sorry.
No, I'm not going to make a motion on this matter. I'm just putting that out there for board consideration.
Okay, then Robert, I believe you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a point of clarification. And I'm not on the board, the Summer Flounder Board. May 21st is when the recreational season begins. Is that correct?
That's the date when our current regulations would allow the fishery to start. A proposal is May 25th.
Mr. Chairman, I guess what I'm struggling with is that, again, pardon my ignorance, not being on the board, there's an amendment that's been accepted, excuse me, an addendum that's been accepted by the board that stipulates what the measures will be necessary for the conservation of this fishery. We don't meet again until August in person, and I'm respectful and understand that New Jersey is trying diligently to find a way to enact equivalency with respect to the management measures, but the board has spoken, and I think here we are. I recognize we're at a process situation, but I think the date is correct. My understanding of the way this fishery is prosecuted, that as of this date, that if those measures are not implemented, it's either a yes or a no. They're compliant or they're not. Am I reading that correctly?
I believe so, but I will turn to our executive director for any additional.
Mr. Chairman, is it okay if I answer the question with a question to the service?
Sure.
So I guess, you know, the timing, Robert, may be, you know, Jersey stated their intention is to implement the conservation equivalency regs next week sometime. And so by the 21st, those new conservation equivalency regs will be in place, but the technical committee will not have reviewed those, and the board will not have approved those, potentially. So kind of the question to the service would be, if they received a letter from us on the 21st that New Jersey's out of compliance with Addendum 28, but New Jersey does have some regs that are potentially equivalent, what does that do to their review, you know, in that interim time period?
Thanks, Bob. That's what I was very inarticulately trying to say earlier. We're in this situation where we don't yet know whether the conservation equivalency is real or not. And so therefore this sort of prospective, it might be cool, but it might not, non-compliance finding is an issue. I think what we would need is for the TC to do their review. The board, the species board, makes a decision based on that TC input. Either they accept New Jersey's proposal or as conservation or not. From there, that species management board would then make a decision based on the outcome of that decision. Are they in compliance or are they not? And then that would then come to the policy board at a later date.
Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It seems, you know, I like to think of what options does the group have moving forward. I think one of them is just maintain the 21st and May 21st, and you know that's the hard line. New Jersey's regs aren't consistent. We don't know if they're equivalent or not. We'll send a letter over to NOAA Fisheries and they start processing. So that's option one. Option two might be this board doesn't, you know, the non-compliance letters would not be submitted until after the Summer Flounder Board acts, and so the compliance non-compliance finding would be contingent on a specific outcome of the Summer Flounder Board, and so it's sort of delegating this decision until Summer Flounder Board acts. And the third option is the more cumbersome one, but maybe you know process more consistent, which is we'd have to get Summer Flounder Board, Policy Board, and Business Session back together after the decision, and that's obviously that you know those options are in order of sort of workload for the commissioners and staff to pull that off. But those seem to be the three options moving forward. I'm not suggesting any's better than the other, but that's what seems to be in front of the board.
Andrew Shields.
So I don't know who this question is. I don't know who can answer this question given the conversation, but the inquiring mind over here wants to know on May 22nd, none of these other things have happened just because of time and logistics, but on May 22nd, what do the anglers of New Jersey need to know is the regulation that's in place? Is it what was in place for 2016? Is it this particular set of regulations, or it is the hopefully adopted by next week conservation equivalency regulations? Which are the three sets of regulations do the anglers in New Jersey need to follow on May 22nd? That would be my question traveling to the shore. Thank you very much.
I think the state of New Jersey has made it pretty clear that on the 22nd that it's going to be the conservation equivalency regulations, and if there's if that's, unless you think that's something different, Russ, then I think we could move on. But
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Don't bother coming down the shore on the 22nd because it'll be closed, so you'll be good. We're planning on putting in the alternative proposal regulatory action next week, so that's in place, so we're good to the 25th, you know, until we open the season at that point.
Is there, and I know I've got a couple hands here and I recognize that, but is there a way that we could craft an amendment to the motion that would say, that would somehow incorporate in the non-compliance finding would not be sent until after, if and after the Summer Flounder Board found that if the Summer Flounder Board found that the conservationally equivalent proposal by New Jersey is not conservationally equivalent. Can we do that? Because then it would be contingent upon that without us having to get together again with the policy board on this. And if we do we need, if that's one of the ways that the board would be willing to move forward, can we take a 2-minute recess to come up with that wording? Does anybody see any objection to having that compliance finding not be sent until after the non-compliance finding not be sent until after the Summer Flounder Board meets and makes a decision, and if they make a decision that the proposal is not conservationally equivalent? Robert Boyles? No? Okay.
I would object, yes, sir.
You would object to that?
Yes.
Okay. So how should we move forward? We have a motion on the board then, and we can we'll have discussion on this particular motion, and we'll make a vote on it. David Pierce, you had your hand up?
No, I'm comfortable with the motion that's on the screen, with the dates. Nothing is going to happen to New Jersey anyways after it has further discussion about the outcome of this. New Jersey's regulations will be in place, the ones that they will be setting fairly soon. They will be in place for a while, and this letter gets sent to New Jersey. All right, they've got it. They know what the situation is, and then it's highly likely, if not definite, that the service will know whether or not they have done these things, whether or not the TC has approved it, whether or not the board has approved it. I see no problem with the May 21st date.
Okay,
it really is in the National Marine Fisheries Service lap, and they'll wait until the outcome of the technical committee and our board decisions, which I suspect will be made by May 21. I think that's what we said we would try to do. The TC would make very quickly, and then the board on a conference call would address the finding of the technical committee. So it seems to be reasonable enough. We don't want to go back to the policy board again. I mean, we are here today. We are making this decision. These are the conditions. New Jersey knows what it. Well, I've said enough on this matter. I'm very comfortable with the motion.
David Bush, you had your hand up, and then Robert Boyles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just very briefly, I understand that there's consistency and policy issues. I'm not a math magician here either, but I know that on the 22nd, no one will be fishing. So that means less harvest than 2 17-inch fish, which in my mind is at least conservationally equivalent until the 25th. Just a thought. Thank you.
Robert Boyles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to explain myself, and I agree with Dr. Pierce. If I recall, the last non-compliance finding this board dealt with was Delaware eels, I believe. I'll look to John. And I believe the remedy, the service was able to offer Delaware for them to rectify and to come in compliance was quite lengthy. So I want to be clear. I certainly support my friends in New Jersey, want this to work, but I think we've got a process, and at risk of being labeled a Pharisee, I think we have to recognize and honor that process to be internally consistent with the way this board has acted for decades with respect to the Atlantic Coastal Act. So I want to be clear with my colleagues and friends in Virginia, the anglers, in New Jersey, but I agree with Dr. Pierce. I think there is time enough with moving forward with the motion as amended, as it is stated now on the board, that it'd be my prayer that this work out well, but I think we have to recognize that there is a process that this group has adhered to for years, and I would just, I just wanted to explain that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Adam.
So one question, and then based on that, a comment. Is there any possibility that the Summer Flounder Board is going to convene next Thursday or Friday?
Tony?
So Kirby doodle-polled the TC. I gave them from Tuesday to Friday based on the fact that Russ told me he hoped that the proposal would come to us on Friday from New Jersey so the TC could have 1 day to review in the time frame. As soon as I know what day the TC is going to meet, I'm hoping it'll be the earlier portion of the week. And we have begged your TC members to be flexible and available as soon as possible. If you could convey that to your staff, that would be wonderful. And as soon as I have that date, I will send a poll right out to the board and will include the very next day after the TC has met. So your availability will be subject to that as a board, but we will do our best. So there is the possibility.
Adam?
Okay, so allowing for that possibility, that would address the situation at that point. New Jersey will have measures in place. If those are the measures that are approved by the board, we've addressed the situation. If not, then on Monday morning, the board will be sending a letter of non-compliance to the secretary. That's my understanding at this point.
Bob, isn't it that we have 10 days after that to send it?
Yes, the executive director has 10 business days discretion or time to write a letter following the date certain established by the full commission.
Yes, Adam?
Does the board need to tell the director to utilize that discretion to not send the letter at that point? You have 10 days discretion. How is the decision made at that point? Because we will not, if we do not have the Summer Flounder convened by May 21st, which is by the end of next week, May 21st is next Sunday, then we will be out of compliance. And this motion would go into effect. So with that 10-day discretion, are we giving that discretion over, or do we need some other formal action by this board? Do we add it to the motion that says we provide discretion within that for the director to not send it?
Do you think, Bob, that you would need a direct order to use that discretion from this board, or would you feel comfortable in using that discretion to its full advantage?
My job gets a lot easier if I know what the will of the policy board is. But I'm happy to wait 10 days after the 21st if that's what the will of the group is.
Further discussion on this motion? Kelly?
So the 10 days are from the decision of the board and the commission, which, if you move forward with the path that you're on, would be today, 10 days from today. So I'm a little bit confused about how there would be a further delay. So I guess maybe that's more of a question, and maybe I misunderstood that last exchange. And then the second point, before folks are voting on this motion, is for the reasons I mentioned before, it's possible that if you sent us a letter based on this, that we would send it back to you asking for further information on how this is hitting the threshold of the necessary measures for the fishery, when you at this point are making a decision not knowing whether the proposal is conservationally equivalent or not.
So my interpretation in our discussion with staff was that because it says the 21st there, if they've not come into, that's when the formal determination gets put into place. And so at that point, there's a 10-day period. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that having the 21st date in there is problematic, but does it solve anything if someone were to make a motion to just postpone action on this motion until after the Summer Flounder Board makes its decision? No? I see Tony shaking her head.
I think, and I can hear from the rest of the board, the concern is that the next time that we're going to meet is in the summer. Further discussion on this motion? All right, I'll give you a minute to caucus on this, and then we'll take a vote. While you're caucusing, Bob wants to bring up another point.
Just procedurally, what really, we may need to tweak the wording at the beginning of this, but really what's happening here is the policy board's recommending to the full commission that they take this action later on today. So this is, this isn't a final action. It's got one more step at the business session in a few minutes, hopefully.
Can we tweak that little language just to make sure we have it moving forward? But I agree with you. It's, okay, are we ready to vote? I'm going to take a, is this a, there's another. All right, all those in favor of this motion, raise your right hand. Keep them up. All hands down. All those opposed to the motion? Any abstentions? 2. Any no votes? Motion carries 13 to 1 to 2. Given that we are an hour behind schedule and we still have a business session to take up this particular motion, we're going to take all the other items that we had on this agenda, essentially agenda items 10 through 13, and we're going to defer them to the August Policy Board. And unless, is there anything else that needs to come before this policy board? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned, and we will go directly into the business session. All right.
It's just not compliance.
Yeah.
No approval.
Okay. Everybody stand up, take a stretch, and then sit back down immediately, and we'll go right into this business session so we can give the South Atlantic Board an opportunity to do their work before their flights go out. I'm calling to order the business session of the full commission. We have an agenda before us. I'm going to modify it, or I'm going to take out the proceedings. There were no proceedings from January of 2017. Are there any other changes or additions to this agenda? Seeing none, any objections to approving the agenda? As modified, seeing none, the agenda is approved. Is there any public comment on items not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 4, non-compliance finding. We have a motion from the policy board, which is up on the board. It does it because it's a board motion. It doesn't need a second. Is there any discussion on this motion? Okay, I'm going to read this into the motion, into the record, and while I'm reading it into the record, please caucus within your states. On behalf of the ISFMP Policy Board, move the full commission find the state of New Jersey be out of compliance for not fully and effectively implementing and enforcing Addendum 28 of the Summer Flounder, Scup, and Black Sea Bass Fishery Management Plan. If the state does not implement the following measures or equivalent measures as approved by the Summer Flounder Board by May 21st of 2017. Shore mode for the Island Beach State Park only, 17-inch minimum size limit, 2 fish possession limit, and 128-day open season. Delaware Bay only, west of the Coalregs line, 18-inch minimum size limit, 3 fish possession limit, and 128-day open season. All other marine waters east of the Coalregs line, 19-inch minimum size limit, 3 fish possession limit, and 128-day open season. The implementation of these regulations is necessary to the achievement of conservation goals and objectives of the FMP to end overfishing of the summer flounder stock. In order to come back into compliance, the state of New Jersey must implement all of the measures listed above as contained in Addendum 28 to the Summer Flounder FMP. Are you ready to vote? Roll call vote.
Maine is absent. New Hampshire.
As chair, I'm not going to vote.
Massachusetts. Absent. Oh, I didn't realize he left. Sorry. Rhode Island.
Yes.
Connecticut.
Yes.
New York.
Yes.
New Jersey.
No.
Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Delaware.
Yes.
Maryland.
Yes.
Virginia.
Yes.
North Carolina.
Yes.
South Carolina.
Yes.
Georgia.
Yes.
Florida.
Yes.
Yes, 1 no, 3 absent, and 1 abstain. Yeah, 2 absent, 1 abstain.
The motion carries 11 to 1, and there were 2 absences. Anything else to come before the business session? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. And when do you want to start the South Atlantic Board?
Like 10 minutes or so.
As soon as we can turn us around.
And then just so everyone knows, we'll have lunch at 12:30, so I'll break from South Atlantic Board at 12:30, grab some food, and then wander back in and finish their business.